Fight! 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to Arcade Attack. A retro gaming podcast for up to 4 players.
Sonic Boom!
What's happening, everyone? It's James with another Arcade Attack podcast, and as usual, I'm joined by the Rolls Royce of podcast company. If in fact that Rolls Royce had been sitting in a barn for 40 years and had no engine.
That's right.
You see, I always like to bring you up and tip you down again, yeah? I've got with me the delectable Dylan.
Thank you, sir. Hello.
Oh, I've got the charismatic Keith. How are you, sir?
Oh, hello.
Oh.
Very nice. Hello.
And the ardent Adrian. I couldn't find another A word, so ardent I thought was without being nasty.
Yeah, all the A words are a bit
they're rude, aren't they?
They are, so ardent will go with.
adventurous.
Ooh.
Oh, there you go. That was easy.
He's recovered from his case of the squids.
Yeah.
He's with us.
Again,
yeah,
apologies.
Again.
I missed the last couple of episodes.
What was it? It was like a dodgy egg curry.
Yeah.
Oh,
It was like a
Don't
curry
say
in
it
an
to
egg.
him. It makes him go grey just when you mention it.
Okay, sorry, mate. Sorry.
He's like a sheet all of a sudden, isn't he? Look. Pale. How are we, chaps?
yeah,
All good. Yeah.
Yeah?
Not too shabby.
Fantastic. Do we know what we're talking about today? We might do.
The impossible
Because-
dream.
The impossible dream. But we're gonna go on to what on earth this pod is about this time. What could I possibly have up my sleeve that hasn't already been wheeled out of the toy box, shall we say? Well, just before I pull back the old satin cloak on that one, I wanted to give a little insight into what I have to deal with when deciding on a pod topic for you listeners out there. And viewers, if you're on YouTube. And needless to say, this lot can be more of a hindrance than a help sometimes. yeah?
Especially that guy.
Well,
Keith. Keith
Don't
was
point at me.
yes, but yeah, all of you had you chipped it. Apart from Deal, I think Deal was quite
Thank
supportive,
you.
so that, I'll take that. But so when deciding the episode, I threw a few ideas out in our chat group, and one of which was today's topic. To which one bright spark replied, "Why don't you just do a pod on all video games ever?"
yeah.
Who was that?
Who was that?
Well, I did it tongue in
Adrian.
cheek.
Yeah, tongue in cheek, my you know what. And you know, at the time, and not realising the sort of enormity of the task, I was like, yeah, all right, maybe, you know, and I wasn't I? I was like,
You were
yeah,
considering it.
might give
Yeah.
it a go. And then I've kind of had a bit of time to digest the suggestion, and I can now safely say that there aren't enough hours in the year, to be able to get that done. Even on a whistle stop tour, I think I'll probably be permanently chained to a desk.
You did like a bullet train tour, wouldn't
Well,
you?
literally, and I think it'd be like a Santa Claus Christmas Eve kind of speed tour, yeah. But I mean, let's face it. Even if I did get it done, I think we'd probably have to bunk at Dill's house for a week to be able to record it. So I don't think that's the kind of company you want to keep for. I know you love us having around for podcasts, but
No,
No,
the smell would be almost intolerable.
yeah,
We've
constant.
done the bunker.
Speak for yourself.
bunker
I'm
podcast.
incredibly fragrant.
Even after a week.
Well,
You guys ain't showering here.
Yeah, not yeah, exactly. But there we go. But and I think sort of moving towards what today's one is about. The Keith, you also had something to say about that, didn't you? But we'll come on to that in a minute when I actually sort of tell everyone what it's about. So I've not done any video games ever podcast for obvious reasons. But I've instead gone for a through the ages look at a genre which is seemingly quite underrepresented in today's market, actually, and not as vibrant perhaps as it once was. Yeah. But it hasn't always been the case. Yeah, it once was very vibrant. So today I'm going to take us through the humble beginnings and then the big old roller coaster rise and fall of the fighting and beat 'em up genre. Ooh. Now, the reason this is a big one is because I'm going to attempt to touch on both beat 'em ups
Madness.
and 1v1 fighting
madness.
games.
Keith
Madness.
is shaking his... He can't
Keith's
believe
sheer
it.
madness.
Keith's like,
you
"No,
can't do it.
happening."
It can't be done.
No, can't be done.
It can't be done.
Well, I'm going to attempt to do it, and I'm going to attempt to do it with plenty of courage and effort and fearlessness. But I fear that I'm going to get holes shot in me left, right, and centre on the socials afterwards. So I don't mind. That's absolutely fine. I'm going to.
All you have to do, James,
Go
is
on.
say it's the definitive history of
And then everyone leaves you
fight
alone.
games and beat 'em ups, and that's it. People can't argue with
Do you remember, Dylan, I used to call beat 'em ups So I used to get mixed up. I got in trouble quite a lot on Facebook.
Oh, you
and
used to
Twitter.
call like Street Fighter a beat 'em up, didn't you?
Yeah, and people used to be angry at me.
People did get angry at
Yeah.
you. But then I called Ocarina of Time an RPG, and then I got it in the
Yeah.
neck.
So we
there
both,
you go.
yeah.
And like,
That's
basically,
a public hanging offence, isn't it? To say something
the upshot is that me and Adrian don't care what other people think.
I'm slowly coming round to your to your way of thinking, because I get it in the neck a lot on the old socials. Oh, you didn't include this. I'm sorry.
We're like, we don't care, mate. Go and do your own podcast.
Get in the bin.
Get in the
My
bin.
point, can you get beaten up in Street Fighter?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, there you go then.
You can. You can get double knockout.
Can you RPG in Zelda? Yes.
Yes.
Lightly.
Light.
Like
RPG
light. Yeah.
Adrian giving us a visual demonstration with a very, like a his index finger and his thumb going.
Like a little bit of something. A little bit of RPG.
Diet Cocoa Beeble.
Just 1 calorie. Just one.
Are we
James,
done,
go on.
lads? Are we done? It's all right. I'm used to Adrian hijacking, not you lot as well. So I'm sure he will at some point, though. So we're all going to have stuff to say, I've no doubt. But I'm going to try and have a look at releases across all platforms. So we're looking at arcade, home, and stuff like that. And again, whistle stop. All right. So this is real kind of,
We're flying. We're going to fly.
litmus paper, kind of touch it on and job done. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we'll see how we get on.
I've got
and
the Mission Impossible theme tune in my head now.
Well, if you don't like it, unlucky. Yeah, simple as that. But as per my usual kind of disclaimer, which I've kind of already touched on, I know I'm going to get, I'm going to miss plenty of titles out, and I'm maybe not going to give everyone's favourite games the spotlight time that they feel it deserves, shall we say. But shout at me on the socials and we can have a chat about it. And then hopefully, if you guys tune into it, you might be able to back me up or not. I don't know. You might hang me out to dry. I don't know. Anyway, moving on. So are we ready then, chaps, for a journey back in time to glimpse at the beginnings of the fighting and beat-em-up genres?
I'm strapped in and ready
Dylan's
to go.
preparing himself with some kind of Buddhist chant over there and a deep breathing exercises.
I'm ready.
Keep smiling.
My body is ready.
Your
His eyes are not.
mind's going, it can't be done.
No.
Keith has been blinded by the light, and he's retreated. He's
It's
retreated
true.
a little.
Are we just
bit.
going to drop a load of lockdown song titles into the pod as we go?
Blinded by... Yeah, go on.
You can do the dance as well?
No.
No, okay. I'll move on. So, Adrian, I'm going to pick you this time. Would you kindly fire up the old time machine? Send us back. Now, does anybody know what year we're going to be going back to?
Ooh. Well, I did play some fighting games on the Spectrum. So
Okay.
it's got to be around that sort of time.
Okay, give me a rough
We're gonna
year.
19...
Yeah, I'm going to say 1982.
82 from age. Keith, give us a ballpark.
84.
84.
There's got to have been one on the Atari saying 1978.
Deal's the closest. We are in fact going 2 years prior. Boom to 1976.
You think we'd have learnt by now? Whenever you do one of these, the earliest
always
game is
earlier.
always earlier.
The year of Rocky.
1927.
Rocky was the inspiration.
The year of Rocky.
Well, there is a tie-in here, and I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah. Well, it's a basic tie-in, but it's a tie-in nonetheless. And we're going back to Japan, funnily enough. Where we begin our journey in the arcades of the time. Now, do we know, obviously none of us were there, but do we know what sort of arcades were about in 1976, chaps? Any rough ideas, any kind of, any names that you think
Platformers,
might have, yeah, lots of platformers.
Space
were about.
Invader is
Mostly,
yeah.
Space Invader
Lots
clones.
of space shooters and
dodgy, like Pong rip-offs.
Yep, loads
Like
of Pong
Defender
clones.
and stuff.
So we had titles such as Road Race, okay, but sort of basic road racing games, very, very popular, and continue to be so. F1, and we had a game called Breakout as well. But the top sort of
Oh, of course, yeah.
the top flight was Seawolf, Gunfight, and Wheels. In the Japanese arcades of the time. Now, I don't know whether they were obviously named different things in Europe, but those were the top three in Japan of the year. So they were the ones that everyone was playing. But what you'll notice is a distinct lack of any sort of melee or hand-to-hand combat or fighting titles, of course. Yeah, there is a good reason for that, in that they didn't exist. Yeah, they just didn't exist at all. And we talked about FPS games, we talked about RTS games and things like that, and they predate a lot of this.
Yeah.
So 70s is way before then. And of course we had sort of video games going back to essentially sort of the 50s and 60s, and sometimes even earlier than that in terms of their very, very early predecessors. So, but we're looking at October of 1976 actually, and when when we saw what is now considered it's a lost gaming title. Okay, it was called. Does anybody know the title of this game? Does it? Okay, let me put it another way. What sort of genre or type of game would you think that the first? This is a 1v1 fighting game. What would you say would be the first?
If it's Japanese or sort of Asian related, some sort of karate game.
You're very close. You're very close. I'm going to come on to that. Put a pin in that, but you're
Judo?
not. No.
Sumo.
No. It's in fact boxing. Believe it or not.
Rocky Link.
Indeed.
Oh, he did give us a clue.
I did give you a clue.
We're not smart, are we?
I put the bait in the water and none of
SMRT.
you took it. Yeah. October of 1976 is when we saw a game called Heavyweight Champ, which was developed and released by Sega. The game features two monochrome sprites with very sort of wide open mouths, gritted teeth, standing facing one another. The aim essentially was to land hits with a high or low punch attack to score points. Okay. Essentially think Pong with boxing gloves, sort of.
Okay.
Yeah. So two sort of stationary figures, and you could, well, I say stationary, you could do a forward move, but it was only sort of one frame, and you could punch. And actually, for kind of two monochrome sort of boxing figures, they actually looked all right, to be fair. There was a little bit of detail there, funnily enough. Your players needed to... I mean, the quirkiest part about this was the control system, because I don't know if, Keith, you want to do a quick Google search to satisfy you guys while I'm talking about this, but if you look for Heavyweight Champ 1976, you will see indeed a cabinet, and it has a pair of red boxing gloves attached to the cabinet by movable rods, and you had to swing them essentially to throw punches. Woo-hoo! Yeah, so it was proper boxing. Yeah, you had to properly go for this. The inspiration for this was from the fairground games of old, such as the arm wrestling and test your strength machines, yeah, all that type of stuff. Nice. So the old fairground circus type stuff, where you put your 10p in or whatever, and you go up against the arm wrestler. I'm sure we've all seen that one. With and you get up to the harder levels, and it's just impossible. Yeah. So that was they were great successes. They were still successful around the time of even when the arcades came out. And it kind of translated into some of the cabinets as well, which I find quite interesting, to be fair.
I found it.
Heavyweight
Oh,
champ.
wow. For the 70s, that is pretty cool. Look at the sprites as well.
That's pretty cool, yeah.
He was right about the detail.
Oh, yeah, look at that. That is pretty great.
It's interesting because you'd think that it would just be like a block.
I was expecting it to be way more basic.
Yeah. And actually, it's I think there's more detail there than a lot of people give it credit for. But the reason it's kind of lost is because no one can kind of really find the cabinets, or there's kind of been parts, or I think even if you could, they're, mega money, and so on and so forth. So, there's a corner of retro gaming which is to do with lost games, i.e. ones that weren't finished, ones that don't survive anymore, etc. So if you ever did manage to find a Heavyweight Champ cabinet in a barn somewhere,
You never know.
My God almighty. Cancel work. It's going to be worth a lot of money. But it was a proper physical cabinet as well. So obviously when we think about some of the 1v1 fighting games that we're going to come on to, you just didn't have that kind of physicality to it. Yes, there was a lot of button bashing and joysticks, but you didn't have boxing gloves on movable rods, did you?
No. True.
The game was a massive success in Japan, and it actually ranked third in Game Machine's arcade chart for the year in terms of gross takings. So it was clearly a good idea to go for that kind of cabinet, and people were looking for that kind of game, even though it hadn't been around before. There's actually not much footage or images online about the game. As I've said, it does seem to be one of those that falls under the lost category. Yeah. There are a few other titles around shortly after that. One called Warrior, which was essentially a very basic sword game. Now, the hardware of the time couldn't actually render a background and have two movable characters. So you had like a printed background, and then you had these white line drawn characters that had a sword, and you could walk around the screen and swing your sword around to hit the other person. Okay. Yeah. Good fun little game, but again, it had its limits, big time. Like we said, a very basic 1v1 sword game, and we had something on the Intellivision a little bit later, imaginatively called Boxing.
Just boxing.
Just Intellivision Boxing. Just boxing. Now, this was, if you take what Heavyweight Champ was in regards to the detail, this was kind of the polar opposite. So it had a ring, and it had like the background like that from the speaker. but the detail on their fighters was pretty woeful, and the gameplay there wasn't really a move forward from heavyweight champ. There was a little bit more movement in the ring, but it was clunky as hell, and essentially the fighters looked just like kind of blobs. So a lot of people, there's not many people that have a lot of love for that game, but it's part of the gaming history. So there we go. There was and then came actually a little bit slightly later on was a pioneer of the button combinations for alternate moves, and it was a game called Karate on the Atari 2600. Of course, it was the Atari 2600. But the genre as a whole, though, would have to wait quite some time before getting into its stride. So we had these kind of offerings in the arcade, and obviously on the Atari, for example, but they weren't making enough waves, yeah? So Heavyweight Champ was quite a hit, but it was like a standalone. It was in a mire of racing games, space shooters and things like that of the time, yeah? So it's at that point that we have to actually leave the 70s behind. And that's it. They've gone up in smoke. There is nothing else to say on that matter. There are a few other sort of unfinished and kind of lower level titles that came out, but they were kind of just clones of what we've just spoken about. It wasn't actually until 1984, okay, where we saw the next few, and I've kind of gone into a bit of detail on these because they would kind of become essentially among the most influential titles in kind of the fighting genre, fighting and beat 'em up genre, should we say? So games, which would shape the way we kind of know fighting games now. And if you asked any modern or retro gamer, what do you think of when you say fighting and beat 'em up games? They come up with a few examples. It would be molded on these examples. So any ideas what these three might be?
Yes.
Okay. Age, what you
Street
got?
Fighter, Double Dragon, and I'm going to say IK, International Karate.
So we're in 1984. We're in 1984.
This is before
a bit early.
Super Mario.
So
Brothers.
you're not wrong. You're certainly not wrong. But we'll come on to that a bit later.
One of them Kung Fu Master.
Kung Fu Master is in there, Keith.
Keith's got it.
Yes.
Thank you all.
I absolutely love this game. I still play it now regularly. It's hard as nails when you get further up the levels, but I absolutely love it. So the first game I've put down as one of the kind of very early influential titles was Kung Fu Master. It gets mentioned all over the place. When you talk about retro gaming, you talk about all of the big studios that were pumping out releases in the early 80s. It's always up there, anyone know who developed it? I talked about it during the Double Dragon pod.
I
I
know
covered
you
this.
did. Yeah.
We
did, because James touched on it with Double Dragon.
It's IREM.
Of course.
We like IREM.
IREM. It was actually known as Spartan X in Japan instead of Kung Fu Master. And for those of you that aren't in the know about the game, maybe for some of the newer listeners, it's a 2D side-scrolling fighting platformer. Is I think the official title, although it is credited with being the first beat 'em up.
Yeah.
But the term wasn't yet used then. We'll come on to that, pop a pin in that. Where you control Thomas in his search for his girlfriend Sylvie, who's been kidnapped by the evil crime boss, Mr. X.
Sounds like Elon Musk.
Mr. Twitter. Mr. X, yeah. Of course. So you have to navigate right to left levels with enemies approaching from either side, and you can use either a punch or a kick or a jumping version of both to defend yourself and defeat the enemies. After you move through the level, you encounter the stage boss, which is a much larger, more aggressive foe that deals a lot of damage to you. And each of those uses different weapons, different fighting styles, etc. So there's a lot of variance in the level bosses. And also, as you go through the levels, in the standard enemies as well, which is quite good. For a very early beat-em-up, they got a lot right about that game. And as I said, I still play it now and still find it hard as nails. So I've only completed it a handful of times, I think. Not recently either. And they get obviously more aggressive, more damage, and it gets a lot harder as you get up to like the 4th and 5th levels. But defeat them, and you climb the stairs. Do this for all 5 levels, and you rescue your beloved. Now, this thing earned an awful lot of money back in the day. A lot of coin dropped in it, and it was a big game, not just in Japan, but across Europe and USA as well. But we'll come on to that in a bit. Our second early doors influential title, which shaped the genre, is another martial arts game. And Age, you tapped on this already. You touched on this already. And we've said there was karate before that on the 2600. There's actually one called Karate Champ.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
can picture it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure you can. If you saw a picture, you'd be like, oh, I've seen that. I've probably played it. Yeah. I'm almost certain I had it on the CPC 464. In fact, I know I did. And in Japan, it was called Karate Do. In Japan. Okay. Also from 1984, this was by Technos and released in arcades by Data East. If Kung Fu Master represented the side-scrolling fighting scene, then Karate Champ was most certainly the nomination for the 1v1 style. Yeah. Players fought either from the left or right, and they either chose the red or white characters, and they had a fixed combat area. So the aim was to hit your opponent by using a kick, a punch, or a sweep, and knocking them down to win the round. But there was some really quirky, funky bits to it as well. There were several different bonus rounds where you needed to do things like kick objects that were thrown at you from the side of the screen, which was interesting. Or you had to like chop a stack of boards in half, that sort of thing, to score bonus points. Okay, and obviously at the time, the whole thing was who's got the best score. You know, who could, so that was part of it, but obviously you had the 1v1 as well. So you had a couple of different aspects. So you could see that the games were then starting to sort of develop and get a little bit more competitive, which previously you didn't really have that live kind of competitiveness. Certainly not in a fighting game anyway. So as a side note, it was essentially, and I'm gonna get stick for this. I know I will. I'm gonna get lots of stick for this. It was essentially copycatted somewhat by way of the Exploding Fist in 1985.
That I remember. I'm sure it had that on the Spectrum.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very, very widely released, very popular game. I mean, it looked strikingly similar because it used the same engine graphics and pretty much everything. Although it did boast more fluid fighter animations and moves, which made it very appealing to gamers, and it was a big title of the day. So, because it was with Karate Champ, there was a certain clunkiness to it and a certain timing to it where you had to kind of get the frames right. Whereas Way of the Exploding Fist developed more fluidity, so you could jump and kick and you could do things at once, and also to do with things like special moves and button combinations, that sort of thing. So they did improve it, but obviously the base game was, and again, I'm probably going to get stick for this, but it was essentially basically a rip-off of Karate Champ, yeah? And Karate Champ is the one credited as, you know, the one that gave birth to that sort of genre, yeah? So finally in the lineup, and I've got to be honest, I didn't know this was released so early. I really didn't, but it was in arcades quite a few years before it came out on console, is Punch-Out!
So what, in 84?
1984.
What, NES?
Wow, okay.
No, arcade,
Yeah.
arcade version.
Can you believe it? Yeah. I genuinely thought that it was the
I would have
arcade.
thought a couple of years later, maybe. Yeah.
It was 87 was in fact the NES
Was that
release.
NES one?
And I didn't realise it was 3 years. I thought it was almost the same sort of time. But there you go.
84.
Was
Okay.
Mario still the ref?
Was Mario still? No, because, and I'll tell you why. Actually, I'm glad.
Jumpman was the
you.
ref.
No, I'm glad you said that. Yeah.
You know.
So you play Little Mac, who needs to defeat a number of weird and wonderful opponents, each with a very unique fighting style.
Mike Tyson included.
No. Got him! Yes, I've got him. I've got him. I should ask Dill what he thinks, because he's got a mouthful of sweets at the moment.
Stop it.
But yeah, no, the original Punch-Out was not anything to do with Mike Tyson at all. It was Little Mac. It was the various different opponents. There was
I was
no.
going to say,
Mario for the ref.
1984, Mike Tyson hadn't quite made his name yet.
Not really, no.
as a
And it
boxer.
wasn't until 87 when it came out on the NES, that it was called Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. So, I mean, bearing in mind, the last kind of character that you fight is a very Mike Tyson-esque kind of shaped character. You know, pretty, really kind of stocky, strong. Very bullish in the ring. That kind of look. So, but yeah, no Mike Tyson in sight in '84. Even though I imagine he was boxing, I don't think that probably wasn't as well known. I don't know. But yeah, the game. Again, later got released on the NES, massive success. It was a big success in the arcades as well. Now, the difference with the arcade was it was actually from the third-person perspective. Now, this is where, again, I got confused. Because you always...
the green outline?
Yeah, that's it. You always remember Punch-Out, don't you? I mean, I remember Punch-Out most fondly from the NES, of course. And again, another game I still play today. But I didn't actually realise that, it was 84, which is quite a while ago. It's 40 years ago.
No.
And don't do it. But but also the third-person perspective.
Yeah.
So quite an achievement for the time, given the amount of movement you had on screen and stuff like that. To make it actually a decent game, to be able to kind of box an opponent in that respect was pretty good. So, I mean, those three titles sort of open a huge door in the kind of fighting and beat 'em up world, even though we can't technically use the term beat 'em up because it hadn't quite been coined yet at that point. So fighting games, combat games, etc. Hand to hand combat games, and they kind of opened the door for fighting games, across the world. And due to their success as well in the arcades and later on the home platforms, would kind of steer developers and studios into lots more investment in that kind of direction. So they thought, hang on a minute, some of the, yes, Heavyweight Champ was popular, but it was a standalone and it kind of had nothing else to follow on from it. Then you had Karate Champ, then you had the likes of Punch Out, then you had the likes of the other games that we mentioned, and it started gaining a bit of momentum. The wheels started turning. So studios thought, hang on, there might be some, mileage in this. And let's be honest, at the time, loads of races were about. Again, still space shooters and things like that, and so on and so forth. And I think there was even light gun games coming out as well at the time, and they were all very popular. So it still wasn't kind of getting going for the fighting games. But the next question I've got kind of for you guys is, where do we go from here? What happens in the mid-'80s?
Yeah, I know the answer.
Do you?
Street Fighter.
Adrian's going to name. Yeah, he's just going to name random fighting games. Yeah. Well, I'm glad you asked. Because from here on out, instead of there being kind of these yawning chasms of time between the releases of fighting games, it quickly became somewhat of a conveyor belt of releases through the 80s and into the 90s. Yeah. And of course, we're here to celebrate all those best titles of the times, but invariably, we're not going to give spotlight to some of people's favourites, or you might want to chip in. So, lads, feel free to represent the underrepresented.
Okay.
All right?
Don't say body blows.
It's coming.
It's coming, man. It's coming.
But not yet. It's not released yet.
No, too soon.
You'll tell us when it is, no doubt. Yeah, and the amount of time you played it. I know. So, next up, to be fair, I want to actually kind of do a little bit of a side note, because I want to mention a particular developer without whom we may not actually have enjoyed the kind of beat 'em up genre as we now known it and have known it before. I've actually mentioned him during the Double Dragon pod, and the developer I want to kind of doff my cap to is Yoshihisa Kishimoto, who many of our retro gaming community members will recognise the name of, and who is affectionately known in the industry as the godfather of the beat-em-up. Okay, he essentially kind of generated and coined that term. Kishimoto was the principal developer in 1986 on the game Neketsu Koha Kunio-kun, otherwise known as River City, which predates what other couple of... You've already said one, Age.
Double Dragon.
Indeed, predates Double Dragon, and predates another title.
Double Dragon 3.
Right, out. Here we go again. So River City, we've got Double Dragon, which is later on. I'll come on to that. Yeah. Any others? Think of a very widely released, probably not so much, not noted as much maybe arcade, but very much so on the home consoles. 464 Spectrum, C64, I believe. Beat 'em up.
Beat 'em up. Beat 'em up.
Yep, definitely a beat 'em up game, and actually, I would probably say, if you look at the timeline, the one that essentially brought the term beat 'em up into existence. Any ideas? I'm hearing a lot of silence, so I'll go ahead and tell you. Renegade.
Renegade.
I was going to say that.
So Renegade was kind of IREM's big big release, whereas River City was, I mean, it's loved the world over now, River City, because obviously of what it did at the time, and what you could do with the fighters and the fact that you had different characters, and it was all, you're almost, at the time it was almost an open world in inverted commas game, because you could move around the screen freely, whereas previously that really hadn't kind of been the case. You had very limited movement. But yeah, I just wanted to kind of doff my cap because, we covered this in one of the previous pods, so I won't go into loads of detail, because if you want to listen to it, Double Dragon pod, and we did all of the kind of history of the studio, the development, and all that sort of stuff. And it includes Kunio-kun and Renegade and various other titles that were around just before Double Dragon came out. So do have a listen to that if you want to get into that detail. So, but that's essentially when the term beat 'em up was coined, and it was used going forward for any kind of side-scrolling or belt-style fighting games against one or more enemies at once. It was closely followed, as we've just said, by Renegade, and with success of each title, it led to more interest and investment in the genre, which was really starting to move mountains at this point. So some other of the notable titles that developed the 1v1 and the scrolling beat 'em up. So we've got them all in the hat at the same time on those mechanics. With the likes of, we had Yaya Kung Fu. Anyone remember that one? See, I asked you this guys before, and I had this on the CPC, and amazing beat 'em up game. Yeah. Anyone remember Fist of the North Star?
Yes.
Yeah, that was on the Game Boy. There's a couple of platforms as well. Very similar to that. So you had various different martial arts styles, kind of weird and wonderful looking kind of characters, each with their different special powers and that sort of thing. And that all of that started to develop. So it wasn't just, you could choose character A or B. You had a choice of 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 characters, each with their own fighting styles and things. And that's when it all started to develop. So that was in 85 from Konami. Another big title, and Double Dragon from Technos in 87. So 87 was Double Dragon. Again, massive arcade game. If you want to go listen to all of the ups and downs on that, then feel free to do so. So go and have a search on the website and all the pod platforms. So we're going to kind of edge into the sort of mid to late 80s, and the beat 'em up release schedule, style and scope was expanding and growing massively, as we can imagine, because it's been given a name. It's got a bit of a character now, and we know what's kind of going on with it. So the likes of 1988's Bad Dudes by Data East. Remember Bad Dudes?
I quite like Bad Dudes.
Cracking game.
Yep.
I was playing that on the NES recently, and it is a bit clunky, but I just like
still
it.
Good fun.
Yeah, it's good fun. Just smashing bad guys and throwing cars and stuff like that. And the super gory Splatterhouse.
Love Splatterhouse.
Who doesn't love Splatterhouse? And that was from Namco.
Yeah,
That was good fun.
Yeah, Splatterhouse was great, and also the soundtrack as well for some of the later games.
Yeah, the sequels are great as well.
Yeah, good sequels actually. And I think in one of Keith's sound test pods, perhaps.
Yes, the Halloween one.
Yes,
yeah,
you did.
I think you did Splatterhouse too. I think.
Yep.
He wears a hockey mask.
Yes, he does.
Yes. Well, what's it called? It's like the Death Mask or something. It's called.
Wait,
I don't know.
It looks like Jason Voorhees has kind of been to the gym.
It's a rip-off of the Friday.
And who's the Turtles character that used to wear?
Casey Jones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who wore it best? Do you think out of those three people?
Well, Jason Voorhees, Casey Jones, or Rick from Splatterhouse.
Yes.
Rick,
Let's say Rick. Let's say Rick.
Let's say Rick because we're on the subject. So, but
Don't
thanks
get
for that.
points for remembering his name. Come
Yeah,
on.
that's good.
Come on, thank you.
AA points and a
Surname?
bag of sweeties. Oh, I've already bought
Rhymes.
I've already bought the
Rhymes,
snacks and
yeah.
the sweets, so you already got them. You've already had them. I still owe Dill a jacket potato from about 3 years ago, don't I?
Oh, crumbs, yeah.
It's in the
Don't
oven.
worry
It's
about
cooking slowly.
Slow cooking 4-year jacket
I
potato.
think you've given me enough snacks, mate. I think we
Yeah,
can call it quits.
maybe. But there was a hell of a lot going on at the time. So you got again Bad Dudes, you got Splatterhouse, and also anyone remember Barbarian?
Yeah.
Yeah?
You can cut heads off.
Yes, you can.
Yeah.
And I think weirdly enough, just as a brief side note, weirdly enough, I think there's a couple of times I've actually posted like an intro video and some gameplay on our socials. Yeah. And it's always got loads of interest. I don't know what it is, but I mean, it was a fairly successful release, but it wasn't like, it wasn't moving mountains or anything. It was a good release and it was good fun. And I remember having it on the Amstrad, but every time I post something about it, it just seems to go nuts. And everyone's like, oh, I remember this. Like, I haven't played this for years. I'm like, it's weird, isn't it? How you get those games that weren't massive successes at the time, but clearly there was a lot of people that were like on board with it. So I find that really good because I used to play that game quite a lot, and that one was by Enix, and that was across arcades and home consoles, mostly across the home consoles, which I think probably where it saw most of its success. So there was in those games a lot more characters, settings, backdrops. Obviously, were a big thing because the previous games only had a standard backdrop because they didn't have the processing power to be able to do any movable backgrounds, that sort of thing. You also had characters, weaponry as well. There's lots of weaponry coming in. This was mainly in the sort of beat 'em up games. You could pick up things like pipes, knives, barrels, that sort of stuff. So it was expanding ever more. There was no greater example, though, of the variance of imagination than Sega's Altered Beast.
Rise
What's the
from
name?
your grave.
What's his name in Auto Beast? Has he got a name?
I don't think he does. No, he's just like an unnamed centurion that gets brought back to life.
Yes, indeed. By the like Zeus,
isn't it?
It is Zeus. I think it is. Yeah, I was going to say that tongue in cheek, but I think it is actually
That was
Zeus.
the packing game for Mega Drive for many years. Is that right?
Until Sonic came along.
Yeah.
I've got so many fond memories of Altered Beast. Playing it back in the day, also playing it tons with my brother as well. Multiplayer was fantastic, and all the noises as well, like the shouting when you
That was me being
and
a
then
wolf. So,
for the bears, and then
Yeah.
and then like,
The dragon.
as well. I don't know what the dragon. Yeah, go on. You can tell he's been to a barbecue, can't you? But you could the imagination on this was crazy. You could essentially you were a human man brought back to life.
man.
You're a human man, but you could become via power ups. You could become bears, dragons, werewolves. What was anything else?
Golden werewolf.
Golden werewolf because they ran out of ideas. Yeah,
Tiger?
and they all had
Tiger.
Was there a tiger?
Yeah, it's the bear. No, am I making that up?
I'm sure it goes werewolf,
Werewolf,
dragon, bear.
bear.
Then I
golden
can't remember
werewolf.
how.
Is it
what's
just
after
4
that.
levels?
No, there must be more than
Doesn't
that.
it go more buff and then werewolf? Am I making?
Oh no, you go
my
buff
brain?
twice. So you go normal man,
Normal man,
more buff man,
with the same
then-
size head.
Yeah, and then more buff
Then
man,
massive
then
man.
giant
Man,
head.
that's
and
it.
Steroids
So that all
and-
counts. Buff man. Counts.
Buff man. Yeah, but
Buff
we
man.
don't know the other. Google is your friend again if someone fancies doing that one. But yeah, the arcade looked really really crisp as well. I was looking at some crisp. I was looking at some footage and it's really 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 nice to look at, and obviously the sounds are just completely in your face, which is great. Especially when you die, you give this ridiculously blood curdling.
Imagine
Yeah.
an altered. How about a movie
just
based on
woke some
Altered
people
Beast?
up, that did.
Who would you
Altered
have?
Beast, yeah.
John Cena, maybe.
Maybe. Yeah,
Andrew
yeah.
Garfield,
I can see
innit?
that. I can see
Andrew
that.
Garfield could be the first guy, and then you can do a bulk
Yeah.
up to
Who
John
would be
Cena.
like the in between?
Oh,
then?
yeah.
You need someone in between.
Yeah, who's in between Andrew Garfield and John Cena?
Answers on a postcard.
Yeah.
Tag us on the socials. Who's your casting? Who,
Chris Hemsworth, maybe. He can be the in between.
Yeah, go on. That's a
man,
good
Chris
shout.
Hemsworth's
That's a
bigger
good
than
shout.
John Cena, bruv.
He's taller.
At the moment, he is.
Then Schwarzenegger can be the last guy then.
Okay. We
Well, he could be the old bear.
That's what, you have to be Zeus these days.
But without neglecting 1v1 fighters, because we're going to touch in on there, because we're on our whistles.
Because we're insane.
We're insane. We've got a somewhat bittersweet moment in gaming history with the release of, because obviously, as we've said before, the 1v1 fighters weren't as kind of quick to release titles as beat 'em ups were from 84. So 84 with Karate Champ, and obviously moving forward with River City with Renegade.
I find that odd because you'd think a one-on-one fighting game would be easier to
well,
make
this is
and
it.
program.
This is why it's kind of a
Less backgrounds needed.
yeah.
Maybe less characters in total. I suppose each character needs a
Less
little bit
sprite
more.
design, fewer sprite designs and things.
So I
Yeah.
personally feel that they made a mistake back then.
Well, you would on the face of it, you would think that a 1v1 basic fighting game is a lot simpler to produce than a many character kind of fluid environment beat 'em up. Yeah, but obviously
But
the
once
industry,
they saw there was a market for them, they really
Well,
there were so many from that time, weren't there?
I think that's
so
the other
many.
part of the issue is they
Dylan's
didn't.
not wearing a
think-
Renegade t-shirt, that's all I'm saying.
we won't tell you what he is wearing because he can shout it out when I come up to that. No, I haven't mentioned that. No, of course I have. You'll see. But I think it might be that as well, is the fact that maybe there wasn't faith in that genre. Maybe there was a little
Possibly.
bit of apprehension, like, oh, it's
But
just
that's
two
it,
people.
because they hadn't had like the Double Dragon, the breakthrough,
No.
massive smash hit
That's right.
with the one-on-one games.
And I
Yet.
think it took. I've got to be honest. It probably took balls to release games like that.
That's actually a foot fighting
no,
game.
no.
Balls.
The look. He's
See what I
giving
did
you.
there? We'll get to it. Even though Dylan doesn't want me to get to it.
No, we're not talking about
balls. So we're gonna kind of summarise that little section with the fact that there wasn't any investment. There wasn't the investment there.
Yeah.
There was apprehension. They didn't really know kind of was anything going to take off. There was no kind of flagship titles at that time, and it needed someone to step forward and go, right, let's put a big title out there. Well, Capcom thought they'd have a go. Yeah, of course they did. Capcom. This is Capcom. Yeah. Hey, they never make a bad game, right?
Hey,
Hey, of course
We got characters.
hey,
that-
Capcom. Hey,
This is Capcom. Of course it is.
we make Nintendo characters too.
hey. Oh,
Sorry, Dylan. Sorry, James.
Capcom make Mega Man, which, can't have that one, but there we go. We'll come on to that. But 1987 saw Capcom release what some would say is a landmark title, and the other side of the spectrum, some would say is a big pile of the dog's finest. Okay, do we know what that was? It's a 1v1 fighter.
Street Fighter.
Yes, Adrian, you can say it, and you've got beat it.
Street Fighter.
So the original Street Fighter, because for those who maybe aren't as in the know on kind of retro gaming and believe that Street Fighter started with number 2, because number 1 kind of fell into obscurity a bit. This is a very brief kind of summary on that. But 87, Capcom releases Street Fighter, stacks of promise, and a very modern pressure-sensitive punch and kick pad system on the arcade cabinet. If anyone hasn't seen that, I looked at it because I didn't know what it was, and I looked at it and I thought it just looks kind of a bit.
Because I honestly remember playing Street Fighter on the Spectrum, and it was nothing great, but it's still quite memorable. And then you forget about Street Fighter, and all of a sudden a much better game comes along. A little bit like, you know, when The Office first came on.
Yeah.
I watched the first ever episode when it first came on BBC Two. I was what is this? And I watched the first episode, and I was like, oh, okay, it's good, but I kind of forgot about it. Then about 6 months later, they replayed it, and that's when it got big again.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to give these things time.
It's funny because, like James said though, at the time when Street Fighter 2 was massive, I had no familiarity with the original. I feel like now people are much more aware of it and what it was, because you can go online, you can see footage and stuff like that.
I think
when we were younger, I don't.
No, I think thanks to
concept of it.
kind of a lot of the stuff like what we do and what a lot of the other fantastic sort of retro sites, blogs, YouTube channels, podcasts, whatever, they keep all that stuff alive. But there's a lot of stuff out there where you can go and look at all the information on that. Whereas had it kind of stayed the way it was, you may never know that Street Fighter ever existed.
Is there a games series where the sequel is so much more important than the first game? So much, I can't really think of one. Can you?
Apart from Street Fighter.
The jumping quality is that big.
There's a question.
I bet there is. I bet there must be.
Right.
It's a good question.
There's one for the
big a
social.
jump. Not that big
Well,
a jump.
maybe
True. Maybe not
you
such
could
a big jump.
maybe Duke Nukem to Duke Nukem 3D. I'm going to chuck that out there.
Oh yeah, okay, there's one.
That's pretty big. That's
But
pretty
that
big.
was a change of genre.
I
though,
know.
wasn't it? So-
Yeah, actually it was. Yeah, you can't have that.
no, you're probably right in terms of the size of the jump. So there probably are sequels that were a lot better than the original. But
And
in
Street
terms
Fighter
of the-
3 was so much better than Street Fighter 2.
Oh, we'll come to that.
Oh, no.
We'll come to that. Yeah, we'll come to that. So that's a good question, though. So hit the socials up for that, because I've no doubt there'll be people with opinions out there. Other than the Street Fighter to Street Fighter 2 jump, is there another sequel that has been that defining over the first game? Do we think?
I bet there's a really obvious one that we haven't thought.
Probably. But sadly, the game was not the success Capcom had hoped for, and it only shifted a measly 1,000 units, which is, in the day, not very much at all. You needed to be at least 5 figures to even be kind of noted as having a half-decent success. They quickly reworked the cabinet, actually, to a 6-button with a joystick.
Yeah, the old pads didn't last.
No, they didn't. Certainly not if you were smashing the crap
Well,
out of them
and
anyway.
you put them in there like that. What are people going to do?
Exactly.
It's a fighting game.
It's a
I'm gonna
challenge,
hit it as
isn't it,
hard
really?
as I
How hard
can.
can you smack it?
Yeah.
I don't think anyone ever did a light punch on those machines ever, did they? Or a medium. Could you actually get a medium punch
I don't know.
on one of those pressure pads?
Little jab.
Little jab. But 1,000 units sold, so they quickly changed it to the 6-button with the joystick layout, and they saw a much greater success with it. Still not kind of the success they'd hoped for, but a bit of movement nonetheless. But it is worth noting that the 6-button layout with the joystick is pretty much a must-have up to present day on
It became standard, didn't it?
Yeah,
Very quickly.
it pretty much has.
Unless you played it on the Amiga. We remember Dylan.
Oh God.
remembers and he
only
doesn't
one
want
button
to.
for you.
Well, I'll get you to regale us with a bit of the Amiga in a minute, Age, because you're the Amiga man in the room, yeah. But yeah, the 6-button layout now, and if you go online, I had a quick look at this a few days ago. But if you go online and look at some 6-button sort of custom pads and things like that, some of them are incredible. I mean, some of the artwork and the design, the lighting, and it's like a whole industry.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
It's mad, and I know our very own Dino's got a very funky looking Street Fighter pad, doesn't he? I think, which he uses because he does a lot of
I
competitive.
think he builds his own arcade
Yeah, I think he
sticks.
does. He probably does. Yeah, but it'd be good to get some of that out on the socials as well, actually, because I don't think we've posted a lot of that, have we? To be fair, so we'll make a feature of that because that's well worth looking at. But yeah, I mean, so the original Street Fighter just didn't really do the business. Didn't really get going.
Didn't catch people's imagination, did it?
No, and it just like looking at game footage again. You know, you can't get excited about much of it.
No,
the enemies aren't very
building
different.
blocks are there, though, aren't they? It's like it's a crucial step.
Exactly, and you just think, well, what if? Well, we did get the if. To be fair, but you know, the original Street Fighter. Summarise in a couple of words. What are your experiences?
I've only played it like in the collections and stuff.
Yeah.
And it's difficult to get into. It just doesn't have that fluidity. It's kind of janky.
It's like pushing treacle uphill, isn't it?
A bit, yeah.
It was good when it was your first taste of that genre, because this is quite new to me on the spectrum. But yeah. Yeah.
We haven't got much to say about it. There is, and that's what I wanted to focus on, is the fact that household name we know now, the beginning was pretty woeful. Yeah,
You know,
There's hope for Rise of the Robots, yeah.
it's been a while. It's been a while. I will come on to a couple of later sequels that came out much later that did well. So I'll come on to that. But I mean,
Ken and Ryu were there.
they were.
Sagat was there, wasn't he? He's the final boss.
Yeah, in
a version of
Oh
Sagat.
God, not the one I'd like to
Not
play
the
with
one,
now, to be fair.
not your Sagat.
No, not the proper one. But yeah, it was a bit kind of bland, wasn't it? I think is probably the term I'd probably use. But post Street Fighter was somewhat of a watershed moment, actually, for fighting and beat 'em up games in the gaming industry as a whole, because the studios and developers released the first installments of essentially what would become multi-million-dollar giants of gaming titles. Yeah. And we know, kind of coming up to the late 80s and early 90s, what some of those titles are, but we're going to kind of go through a few. And feel free to throw some of your own in, chaps. But we're still hanging on to the 80s by a thread in the next part of the journey, albeit the very end of. So the year I'm going to talk about is 1989. Now, this is a big year. This is a big year. So before I get into the kind of meat on the bones, chaps, can you reel off any big beat 'em up games specifically, of that year? So AA points and a bag of sweets available for correct answers.
Final Fight,
Yes.
also known in its production as Street Fighter 89.
I didn't know that.
Did you not?
No,
I didn't
I
know if
didn't
there's a
know
couple
that.
of
Well,
notes
bravo.
because obviously it was Capcom. Yeah, it was originally called Street Fighter
Is indeed
89.
Capcom.
And
Yep.
I think that was before they made the decision to do a proper sequel to Street
Do
Fighter.
it properly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Final Fight,
Final Fight,
absolutely. Yep.
Streets of Rage comes later, doesn't it?
Well, hold on. On that point, sorry, Final Fight, just because, I mean, we will mention it a little bit later on, but just to kind of give it the credit it's due, went on to release a total of 6 games and 3.5 million units sold as of 2019. So pretty good, yeah?
Yeah.
So it wasn't really the final fight, was it?
No, it's,
Hey,
no.
ooh,
Oh, here
A's
we
back.
go.
A's back.
But I mean, that I'll be honest. 3.5 million is modest compared to some of the other fighting games, the numbers we're going to talk about, but pretty good. And as far as I'm concerned, a very loved selection of titles in the retro community.
Final
So
Fight.
I love it.
Yeah, they never really topped the original though, did they? I don't think.
No, and
Some of the
I
sequels
couldn't.
are all right,
I played 3 the other day, and Hagar's in like this green kind of leotardy type, and I'm like, "What is this? Has he gone to the
He
disco?"
was a
or
wrestler. They like a leotard.
They do.
Yeah, but okay. I mean, he still looked badass in the first one.
You do you, Hagar. You do you.
Am I premature in saying that the original Turtles arcade was 1989?
You would be correct in saying that. Well done.
Yes.
Bravo. Yep,
thought
Teenage
so.
Mutant Ninja Turtles arcade by
Konami.
That was a good game. I remember playing the
damn
C64 version.
4-player
of that.
cabinet though.
So much love. So much
that
love
was
for
the
this
first
game.
one of their licensed one, and because obviously some more that we will mention in a minute. followed
Indeed.
quickly afterwards. But
Now, Turtles, again, just to touch on the credit that is due if it gets lost in the mire later on, over 50 titles, more than that, way more than that, across various platforms, spin-offs, etc. Yes?
On the flight, I went to Spain recently. On the flight, I took Becca's 3DS, and I bought this cart with like hundreds of games on it. A bit dodgy, and I
did it
finally
have? Go on.
and I finally got to play a certain Turtles game called Turtles Arcade Attack.
Hey! Yes!
Was it good?
And is it everything I told you it was?
Well,
about?
no, I picked Raphael as my main player, and you can choose like a co-op turtle with you.
Okay.
So I chose Leonardo, and yeah, it wasn't very good.
It's just very dull.
It was dull.
It's technically quite
The
impressive.
graphics are not bad
for the
I think it's a
2DS.
it's a DS
It's a
game,
DS game,
but I
yeah.
played it on the 3DS. So the graphics are okay, but I got
It's
bored.
dull. Yeah, it's really.
I played.
It's like the opposite of us. So Arcade Attack game, technically impressive but dull. Arcade Attack podcast,
technically
technically
not very impressive.
but quite
We're
entertaining.
quite
Well, I turned it
I'll
off.
take that.
We're not dull.
I played FIFA 11 instead, and I was like, I'll be Arsenal with Shamak up front. And then play that instead.
Marouane.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah, Marouane
Blast
Shamak
from the
leading the
past.
line. Not leading the one.
It's actually taken a bit longer to get a football reference in than I thought, to be fair. So that's
Who
all
do we
right.
usually? What's it? Trundle. Where's Lee Trundle? We needed.
Lee Trundle. Okay.
Well,
Football League
So,
references.
Turtles Arcade Attack is actually it's the game that used to beat us to the Google search.
It did.
Up until about 18
That was
months
our big
ago, I
battle,
think.
wasn't it?
But Dill's the man. Dill made
Finally
it happen.
beaten.
I beat them up. I beat it up.
Oh! So if you
Google.
type Arcade Attack now, it's the first result.
Konami's writing a lawsuit letter. Do you realise you're a copyright of our Arcade Attack logo?
You weren't the first people to
I
attack
think
an
they,
arcade.
I think they might
Yeah.
have predated us slightly. But there we go. So, okay, we've got Final Fight and their releases and sales. We've got Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Arcade by Konami.
This is Konami was so smart around this time with
That-
the licenses. Like that was the peak of Turtle Mania.
Well, 19...
Actually, it wasn't even the movie hadn't even come out yet.
No, it hadn't. And actually,
Yeah.
if the soundtrack, but specifically the Partners in Crime song
Yeah,
from
yeah,
1990, I think it was like early 1990. That was a massive hit as well. And so obviously the game naturally, rode the wave, didn't it? But it was absolutely fantastic. But well over 50 titles released across various different platforms. More out these days, including Shredder's Revenge, which loads of us have played. 18 million and counting in sales.
Well,
in
Turtles
sales
are still
so far.
going strong.
Yeah, very much
Long
so.
may it continue.
Very much so. We've still got a couple of other sort of AAA titles on there, and a few other kind of good home titles that perhaps we haven't talked
1989,
about. Can we think of any others?
Golden Axe.
Yes,
Hey.
that's one of the AAA titles
Golden Axe is great.
by Sega and US Gold. 8 games in total across the series, so fairly modest, but a massive, massive hit when it came out, and the sequels were also good as well. But fairly basic-ish storyline. But I think what made it was like the enemies were good.
Death Adder.
Death Adder was brilliant.
Oh yeah.
Top
Yeah.
5
Some-
character for me. Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
No, that was a good choice. We liked that choice, didn't
Yeah.
we?
Death
we
Adder,
liked
yeah.
the choice of Death Adder.
You loved
in the
Death
Sega
Adder.
game.
The others, not so much.
Well.
Aye.
Oh, hey, I see what you did there.
no, not that one either.
Yeah, I couldn't defend my choices. I felt a bit bullied in that episode.
What's really funny about that? Ever since we
Put
did
it on
that,
yourself.
all I can see is adverts for like Monkey Ball and stuff. Like,
Yeah.
and like whenever I search for retro games on Google, I see a Monkey Ball reference on there somewhere. And I'm like, okay. So any road. So yeah, so we've got Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Final Fight. We've got Golden Axe. There's one more which actually was a big
really big
title.
one.
It wasn't actually an arcade game. It was later on, but it wasn't actually
Home
arcade.
on, okay, 89.
You might not get this one. Think
Can you tell us what console it was on?
pretty much all of them. To be fair,
Can you give us a clue?
wrestling. The title,
WWF WrestleMania.
indeed.
Oh,
well done, Age.
That early?
Yeah, 89 was WWF WrestleMania.
Wow, that's
That was an arcade game first.
no, that's a different.
no.
one. You're thinking of that WrestleFest.
You're
wasn't
thinking
it?
of WrestleFest, and
WrestleFest.
also
Wow,
there was
badass.
also one.
That was
there was one
awesome.
shortly after called WrestleMania Challenge,
Yes,
The graphics in
yeah.
that
and,
arcade
and
game.
then a wrestling
Oh,
challenge.
WrestleFest is fantastic.
Oh, I love the graphics.
Yeah.
That was a little bit later, wasn't it?
Yeah, the big chunky cartoon.
Yeah, the
yeah,
little- like-
It's
yeah.
so good. And then later on, you had another WrestleMania arcade, which was the
That came out on the
digitised
consoles as well,
graphics.
didn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So there's been a hell of a lot of wrestling games since then. But that was a really popular home title
WrestleMania,
that sold an
yeah,
awful
I bet.
lot of units. Loads of games. I mean, the spin-offs from them. It's well over 100 million units.
Oh,
worldwide.
wrestling games with WWE games.
Well
yeah,
over 100
crazy.
million units, stupidly successful. Some other ones, some other titles of the day. We had RoboCop, Data East.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, a side scroller, isn't it? Yeah.
We had Strider from Capcom, US Gold. We had Dynasty Wars from Capcom. We had Ninja Gaiden from Tecmo, and we had Shadow Dancer from Sega. There you see.
Arcade not as good as the Mega Drive version.
We
but
can.
still,
I think we
still.
could debate. Yeah, I haven't gone into that kind of detail.
No, we won't.
think
I
we
won't.
could
I
debate.
won't hold up the tour.
Ding, ding, next stop. So 1989 was kind of a bumper year for the beat 'em up and hack and slash genre, both in the arcades and on the home consoles. As we said, that even the wrestling games were now starting to make a mark, and that was a really popular one. So developers kind of knew this, and they started to begin what a lot of gamers consider the kind of golden age of the beat 'em up genre. Yeah. So 1v1 fighters still kind of playing second fiddle because they didn't have as many releases moving into the 90s, and they only had the likes of the earlier sort of fighting games like Pit Fighter, for example. Remember Pit Fighter? Yeah.
You remember
That
it
wasn't
well.
a Pit Fighter soundtrack. That sound effect. That was just me going cringing at Pit Fighter.
Well, I suppose it did try and use real human graphics, didn't it? Human.
I think the operative word is try.
Tried.
But that really, and there was
do you remember Kev's old house? He had a pit. Do you remember?
Yes, the pit.
And we
Oh,
used
in
to
the
say
garage.
we can recreate Pit Fighter.
he did.
We never went.
We
in
never
the
did the pit.
We never
scary.
fought in the pit. No.
Oh, he had a real Kev. Where's your pit now?
Why would you ask somebody that? Out of context, that'd be
Kev,
someone
where's
like,
your pit
what
now?"
are you talking about? Where's your pit, Bev? Sorry? But yeah, good old Pit Fighter, flying the flag around the sort of 1990, 1991 mark. But that would all change within the next couple of years, of course. So 1990 saw a worldwide obsession with pretty much all things racing and Mario. Yeah?
Combine the two.
Yeah.
Mario Kart.
Whey!
Bob's your uncle.
We had the release of Super Mario Brothers 3. Huge title. We had Super Monaco GP. And we had Super Off-Road. All great games, yeah. All great. I got so much love for especially for Super.
Always
Off-Road.
super at the
Always
start
super.
of the title.
So the fighting genre in general really had a fairly modest release schedule that year, and played second, if not third fiddle in terms of the 1v1 fighters. But it was very much the calm before the storm, and we know what storm's coming. We really do. So 1991 arrives, and so does quite possibly the most famous and most played 1v1 fighting game ever to grace our joypads. What am I talking about, fellas? All together now.
Street Fighter 2. The
Dill's still
the
thinking
World
because
Warrior.
he's wearing a different T-shirt, which we'll come on to in a minute.
I know. I was like,
Don't worry.
It's not my chance to screen.
Yeah, it will be in a minute. It will be in a minute. I want big dramatics from you. Yeah, I want big dramatics from you. But I am, of course, talking about the legendary Street Fighter 2. This was released in February of 1991. I didn't realise it was so early that year. I thought it was. I thought it was a bit later that year. But there we go. In the arcades, the game was pretty much an instant success. New visuals, fighting styles, special moves. More fluidity in the movement, was all vastly improved over the first title. It was essentially a polar opposite game. It was just everything was better, turned up to 11. And gamers simply couldn't get enough. So, I mean, I could go on and on about the game for hours and hours, but luckily we did a podcast on it. Woohoo!
We've covered it.
Yeah, we have covered it. So, if we dedicate an entire podcast to the title, you can actually go and listen to the whole thing, website or any pod channels or whatever, but well worth a listen because we do go into some detail and wax lyrical and all talk about all the great nostalgia. But what a title, though. I mean, play it. I could
Massive.
just so easily
Massive.
just
Played it
switch on.
yesterday. I literally play it every week. Like,
Deals into it, but who isn't? Honestly, I play it. I'll switch the old, SNES on, bang, bit of Street Fighter. Yeah,
That's a great version of it, isn't it?
Oh, it's just the characters, the backdrops, the music, the moves, the special moves, the button combos, and they're not stupidly difficult button combos.
It was so massive. Like anyone our age, you have to. If you're just kind of looking back at that period of your life, Street Fighter 2 is there. It's there in some way.
It's almost bigger than the game, isn't it?
Yeah, it was. It was a phenomenon.
It just
was.
kind of. I mean, I remember having.
Massive.
I had posters.
Yeah,
I had,
sticker album,
comic books, comic books with the stories in. Action figures, loads of action figures. It was just endless, wasn't it? I mean, the merchandise and was it was all just huge. But great game, never gets old. It's one of those games never gets old. Absolutely timeless. But to be fair, no surprises that it topped Game of the Year charts and sales charts for that and the following year. It never slowed down. It just kept going. And it continued to grow long after the initial release. I'll give you a small insight on the coin drop earnings of the game. In the UK alone, in 1991 in isolation, and this is in the year 1991, 229 million was dropped playing the game.
No.
In the UK alone?
Correct.
No.
Correct.
Half of that was a Water Palace, I think. I used to watch people play that for hours.
I mean, that just... But if you think about it, if every single shop, outlet, everywhere had it, you imagine it was just being played constantly.
Yeah.
Imagine,
in an arcade especially,
imagine
it would have been from the minute it opened to the minute it shut.
you own a chip shop. Oh, I think we need an arcade machine. Oh, and you order Street Fighter, you get the first one instead.
Fail. But I couldn't believe that when I read it. But that's the truth. And bearing in mind, if you think about it, it was released February, so he had the whole year,
full year,
and obviously arcades were big. They were everywhere. They were chip shops. They were in barbers. They were in, you name it, retail parks, the lot. Yeah, and people were just playing it non-stop, queuing up.
Did you post that? Was it that meme saying not a street, the locations technically went street?
Oh, I've seen it. Yeah,
barely a street yet. There's one location's a street.
Isn't it just like Chun-Li's stage? Isn't it? That's the only one.
I think they're saying arguably the Balrog stage is kind of a street outside the boxing arena.
Oh, of course, yeah.
That's the questionable one.
The Vegas one, yeah.
So
call me Mr. Picky. Yeah. Call me Mr. Picky. But it's stupid numbers. It's just stupid numbers. But I don't know how, if you divided that by, I might do a bit of digging on that and find out how many machines that was across. But it was tens of thousands, maybe even more than that. I don't know. But it was everywhere.
It was.
And as soon as the place opened when they shut, people were queuing up to play it. So there we go. And you got to imagine that the one person playing it wasn't just putting in 10, 20 or 50p, whatever it was. They were putting in a few coins, weren't they? So. But if you adjust that, this is the stupid bit. If you adjust it on today's inflation, don't start me on that. If you adjust it on today's inflation, it works out as £490 million. Dollars. Sorry, do apologise. Dollars. So it's not quite as high, but $229 million, $490 million today. Obviously, slightly less than the current exchange rate, but that is just obscene. That just tells you. That just shows you
in a year. Or less.
The takings were just non-stop. Yeah. There we go. There's a number for you. But what I want to know is, yes, we've talked about Street Fighter 2. We've waxed lyrical about that. We've got the pod about it. So if you want to know more, go and have a listen. But what else was around that year? Are we able to mention any other fighting or beat 'em up games in the same breath? Of course we are.
1991. Streets of Rage.
Thank you.
About time too.
Just like waving my arm and keep like, come on.
Yeah.
I will. Yeah, I'm coming on to that actually. Funnily enough,
okay,
so that's good, and we can talk about it because I love Streets.
We all do.
So, the first one on my list was SNK's Fatal Fury, King of Fighters.
So that was also 91.
It was, which dropped in November of 91.
Right.
So it's quite late on. It was a bit of a Christmas hit, that one, obviously, which would go on to deliver 10 sequels and spin-offs across its lifespan, along with the first, as we just said, Streets of Rage installment, which arrived on which system?
The Sega Mega Drive.
Yes.
/ Genesis.
Genesis. Initially, and then Genesis, and then stepped into arcades from the second instalment, which is a bit of a weird one, really.
Wait,
isn't
what?
it?
No, Streets of Rage never had an arcade machine. Did it?
No, that's what I said. So the first one never had one, but the Streets of Rage 2 apparently did.
Where?
Apparently had an arcade.
Might have done. I don't remember it, but it might have done.
Hey, we covered this on a podcast. You should know.
I believe it was kind of swallowed.
You know
up.
what my research is like.
I'll double check it, but I'm pretty sure it had an arcade.
Google it.
No, just say there was one. I didn't hear all that.
I don't mind. I don't mind.
history.
He's like, get on with it already. Streets of Rage. Thoughts?
Love it.
Amazing.
Yeah, we like it a lot.
Banging dance
still.
music.
Yeah, Streets of Rage 1 still.
Punching people, kicking people, banging dance music.
Brilliant.
What more do
What
you
else
want?
could you have wanted in 1991?
No, well, nothing.
Nothing.
I mean,
that's all you need.
Characters were great, enemies were great, bosses were great, special moves blew my mind with like
Characters with interesting hobbies like the Lambada and
the Lambada
and Bonsai and
who was the Lambada again?
Blaze.
Yeah.
I think she's very good at it too, I bet.
Yeah, I bet she is.
Listen, we always end up talking about Blaze, don't we?
Oh, Blaze.
It's the flick in the hair. It's the flick in the hair, isn't it?
You're a smitten kitten for Blaze.
Oh, dear God. But there we go. Well, the interesting thing about Streets of Rage was that even though they had sort of 3 successive and fairly quick releases,
Yeah.
it was actually a 25-year gap between the third and the fourth game, but it's pretty much still seen as one of the premier beat 'em ups through the ages. And to be fair, 4 did it justice.
Yeah.
I have, well, you all know I've got absolute nothing but love for that game. Still play it now, play it regularly. Got nothing bad to say about it, and it's very highly rated as well. So I think they did a very good job. But I mean, the originals. I mean, okay, you can kind of talk all day and night about number 3, can't you, Dill? But about how we love it or don't love it.
Funny story about Streets of Rage 4 is that I dropped a little comment on their Facebook post saying that, oh, you guys have done really great and I really love it and da-da-da-da. And this was must have been a couple of years ago. And then I saw a thing in my Facebook thing like today that said, oh, Streets of Rage has replied to your comment. Streets of Rage 4 has replied to your comment. So I looked at my comment. It was like some kind of look at this and some dodgy link and da 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 da.
Oh god!
boo.
It wasn't Streets of Rage 4. It was Streets of Range 4.
It's a range.
What? With the same picture, Streets of Range 4.
Were you marginally intoxicated when you did the original comment and you didn't look at
And
the
you
name?
clicked on the link, and now you got loads. You lost all your money. Is that right? What's happened?
I was yes, I'm
Lots
very
of viruses.
Poor. I'm even poorer than I was before. No,
Oh wow, crypto! Let's do it.
I would no. To like Dotemu and that who made Streets of Rage 4, I gave them the love because I initially did not give them the love. I was like this. I played at EGX and I was like, I did not give this the love. I was like, guys, you got some work to do, and they listened, and they did it, and they smashed it. And then I said, I stand corrected. Said the man in
One of very few times. One of very few
Man
times
in
you've seen
charge
it.
of Streets of Range 4's
Range
Facebook
4.
account.
Streets of Range. That's brilliant. It wasn't connected to the range, was it? Like the home shopping place?
No, I think someone just tried to spam me.
That comment from my mate Matt, it's like, oh, you did the housework going. I replied about 10 years later.
What was that about?
Was it like, no, it was more than that. It was 2008. It was 15 years
Sorry,
later.
Matt. I used to work at Matt many, many years ago in Orpington when I was working that silly off marketing job. He's moved to Japan. I must have pinged up on Facebook.
Why would it have pinged up on your Facebook?
I was like, well, I better reply to this.
Just random comment
very
15
well,
years
thank
later.
Did he then reply to
I don't think he has. He's waiting 20 years now, isn't he?
He's going to wait 30, another
Yeah.
30 to double it.
Good old Matt.
15 years for a comment. For a reply. Oh,
You'll
my
get a
God.
comment from Streets of Rage 4 in about 10 years' time.
She's oh dear. Anyway, where were we? Streets of Rage.
Streets of Rage, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, loads of good stuff to say about that, and move the genre forward massively again. But we can't forget another big title in '91, and again, I can't believe this was released in '91.
91 Simpsons?
Yes. Again, I didn't realise it was so early. I knew it was early 90s, but 91.
Yeah, I remember
Yeah, it was really early on in the Simpsons' life.
Yeah, I remember Simpsons being big when we were 8, so that would have been 1990.
Yeah. I mean, let's face it, a lot of the games that were appearing in the arcades were partly living in the shadow of Street Fighter 2, of course, because it was just such a behemoth in terms of a game. But The Simpsons won the hearts of millions because it had a really quirky and fun play style, madcap variants in enemies and the bosses, and it looked like they'd all been pretty much pulled straight out of the TV show. Yeah. It was essentially like playing the TV show. It's just
And anyone could play that as well because it's only 2 buttons, isn't it?
jump and hit.
Jump and attack.
So,
yeah.
it was really easy
Why
for
did that
kids
never
to pick
make
up
any
and play.
consoles? Does anyone know?
I don't think there's any real good reason for it. There's no reason whatsoever they couldn't have
That's
done it
a
on the Mega
guaranteed
Drive.
lack of information
money, mate.
online.
It's bizarre, especially what the Turtles games got home ports. So
The
I
Turtles
don't-
game, which is very similar
yeah,
to it.
I don't know. I really don't know. We got Bart versus the Space Mutants instead.
Yeah. You love Bart versus the Space Mutants.
Oh, I
James.
don't love it.
It's too difficult.
I've got some fond memories of it because I used to play it around. A mate's
Yeah,
house
but
a
when you
lot,
think we
but-
could have had
How dare you have
The
different
arcade
views?
But it
games
is.
to
Listen, step outside, bruv. Yeah, it's rock hard. Like
It
it's
is, yeah.
stupidly hard. Like it's so frustrating. But you're right. I would much rather have
Yeah,
had
it gets
the Simpsons
crazy.
arcade. It makes so much sense. But then there must have. Well, maybe it's just a complete oversight. Maybe there was so much focus on releasing newer titles that it
Konami
just didn't
bought a
happen.
lot of their arcade stuff home, so I don't understand it.
I mean, let's be honest, we're getting into the time now where the explosion happens.
Yeah.
So it's the conveyor belt is going full pelt here. It's been turned up to 11. But one thing I did want to say is we had a gaming session at yours, Keith, didn't we? I think we had 4 players on the go on Simpsons.
Yes, yeah.
It was just the nostalgia glasses on that
that's
one.
great.
I think I was Marge. Smashing everyone with my vacuum
Marge has
cleaner.
the best range, doesn't she?
She
'Cause
does.
She has the Hoover.
She does. But it's such a fun game, though.
Yeah,
and the visuals are just wicked as well.
Yeah.
But we're going to really start moving through the gears now, chaps, and speeding things up, you'll be pleased to know, Dill. Because he's like, just get on with it.
He's pointing.
I know.
Pointing
I know.
his t-shirt.
Body's Blaze t-shirt.
We're almost there. We're almost there. Hold tight. A couple more minutes, yeah? So as we speed into 1992 and then on to 93 and 94, so we're looking at early 90s still, early to mid, shall we say. Sequels were, of course, on the menu with Street Fighter producing a Champion Edition, Final Fight, Streets of Rage, Turtles, all expanding their portfolios, of course, because of the successes of the first game. Not just successes, runaway successes. Yeah, they were all successful in their own right. We also had some other titles, which I've got to mention. Asterix, and remember the Asterix games?
Good game.
That's really good.
Really good
the
fun
arcade
games.
beat 'em up, yeah.
Bucky O'Hare.
That's really good.
That looks good.
Again, Konami.
Yeah. X-Men games. Obviously, we had X-Men Arcade.
Yeah.
And we had a bunch of home console versions of X-Men games as well. Captain Commando. Anyone
That's
remember
Capcom as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think. Yeah.
That's a great little game. It's
Yeah.
weird as hell. You can Captain Commando is like a kind of a astronaut space hero kind of guy, but then you can play like a mummy. Work that one out, and then there's a couple of other variations, but the characters are all really weird and different. But hey ho, good fun. King of Monsters.
Yes.
I love
SNK.
King of Monsters.
Yeah.
We did do a pod on that many
We
years
did
ago.
it, yeah.
Yeah.
It was a split pod, wasn't it? Didn't we do Sunset Riders?
Rampage, isn't it?
No, versus Rampage.
Oh, was it versus Rampage?
I think so.
Okay.
We're going. This is going so many years
Let's
ago.
go way back.
We're going. Take it back.
King of Monsters was interesting, though.
Take it back.
I love that
Frank
song.
Stallone.
Because the first King of Monsters is like a one-on-one fighter
Yes.
in a closed-off kind of area of the city.
Yeah,
And
you can
still
trample
smash
the,
things, but
that's
you're
it.
one-on-one. King of the Monsters 2 was a side-scrolling beat-em-up.
Yes, it
So
was.
two of you play together as two of the monsters
So
and fight.
what does that
Other
say about
monsters.
SNK kind of embracing both of those genres essentially under the same umbrella? So in your face, yeah.
So there.
SNK have made this podcast possible.
They have,
Yeah.
and that's it. See you later. But I love King of Monsters,
Yeah,
and
it's
my two little ones love to play it as well because it's monsters.
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
just cool looking monsters
Yep.
that are trashing the Golden Gate Bridge and falling over in the sea and all that sort of stuff. And it is like ridiculously good fun. We also had Samurai Showdown. You
Yeah,
remember
the first
Samurai
one.
Showdown?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
actually Shodan.
Shodan.
I share a good story about that on the pod, don't I? About the blockbuster.
Well, it's a story.
Yeah.
It's not a good story, but
I'm only joking.
yeah.
Art of Fighting as well.
Yeah, that was the one that had like the knockoff Steven Seagal bloke, wasn't
Yeah, it did. It did.
Robert, I think his name is.
Robert.
So he has like the waistcoat slick back Steven Seagal kind of hair.
Yes. And from the various studios, they made yet more waves at the arcades and at home. So this was really getting into gear now. But 1992, however, saw the release of what would become the biggest selling, and many say most beloved fighting game franchise in history, with titles still being produced and in the top flight today. Dill, would you introduce the game I'm talking about from 1992, please, from Midway? It is...
Rise of the Robots.
Hey!
The movie's coming out next year.
The Robots 11.
Wait, hold on. That's not what I've got in my notes. Hold on.
It's Mortal Kombat.
You've got to do the scream from the film.
Ah!
No, Mortal Kombat!
Rob actually did it really well on the Mortal Kombat podcast.
We've done about 5 Mortal Kombat pods, so it's in one of those.
Yeah. Brilliant.
I am, of course, referring to the behemoth that is Mortal Kombat. Created by Mr. Ed Boon, John Tobias, Paolo Garcia, and John Edwards at Midway and NetherRealm Studios. So a very different visual style to that of the previous sort of fighting games. Mortal Kombat had the more sort of violent and gory edge, pretty much, over any of its predecessors. And the gamers absolutely loved it. Well, who wouldn't, let's be honest, yeah? It was a proper raw fighting game, but you also had digitized graphics, which was very different. So you had pretty much the real people on the screen fighting. A unique 5-button control system, and also the inclusion of finishing moves called Fatality. Come on, do it.
Finish him. Fatality.
That was good.
Exactly. And but yeah, drew much positive and negative attention from the public and press. It wasn't all plain sailing for these chaps.
No such thing as bad publicity, though.
You've stolen my line.
All
That's
PR.
what I put at the end of this paragraph.
All PR is good PR.
He's stolen my line. But yeah, you're absolutely right. So, but like we said, no press is bad press. Yeah. So, I mean, the franchise remains really strong with Mortal Kombat 10 and 11 released in the last few years. I believe 10 was 2015.
Yes,
I couldn't believe it was 8 years ago. And they've announced 12.
No,
Which is-
it's
not
it's
12.
called
Well,
something else. isn't it?
12's out. 12's out. The end. Mid-September.
Yeah, but then they're going to remaster Mortal Kombat 1, aren't they?
Yeah, that's
Yes,
it. That's what I'm thinking.
I was going to
yeah.
mention that, but you've already just said it.
Okay.
But yeah, they are going to remaster it.
Yeah, yeah.
But no, my kind of if you're to look at the modern games as well, where a lot of older games have kind of gone by the by and just remastered, Mortal Kombat still goes with fresh titles,
Brand new games. Yeah.
and they're massive. They're still big. I mean, I downloaded 10 sort of, I don't know, 6 months ago because it was on an offer, and I hadn't had a good beat 'em up for years. A good 1v1 for years, and I was like, this is great,
Yeah.
because you could build different characters, all the classics with some of the new ones.
And they got onto a smart sort of marketing ploy, didn't they, by getting in characters from other
The
franchises.
licenses they bought,
Yeah.
they got Terminator, they got
RoboCop,
Alien, they got
Rambo.
Predator, Rambo.
Yeah, mad.
Several other Leatherface,
Loads. Yeah.
Jason Voorhees.
Yes.
There's several on there.
And
so.
the fatalities now are quite sickening,
it's
actually.
crazy.
They are quite. They're
We've got
crazy
fatalities,
detail.
brutalities, which just and they're. I mean, even some of the special moves, to be honest, just in game, they're horrendously violent. So yeah, very much an 18 plus only for that.
18 plus. You need to be like 30.
30. Otherwise, you'll be scarred for life. But yeah, absolutely. But it remains strong. And as I say, you've got the 12th title coming out, I believe, September this year, so 2023. So, I mean, the attention these gained was such that, along with titles such as Night Trap and Lethal Enforcers, actually prompted the formation of the ESRB in the United States, which was to give games ratings moving forward. I'm not surprised because, let's face it, you wouldn't want to be just buying a game for 10-year-old Johnny and somebody gets their spine ripped out of them and all that sort of stuff, yeah? So that kind of made sense. Sequels, of course, followed. 1993 saw Mortal Kombat 2 very quickly after the first one, and followed by regular sequels and spin-offs across arcade and multiple home platforms. And to date, the franchise has sold more than 80 million units and counting, and sits as one of the biggest grossing franchises ever. Not just fighting, but any.
It's got a badass logo as well. I liked it in the t-shirt.
It doesn't quite beat Minecraft, but then, hey.
What does? Yeah.
What does, exactly. So, now although 1v1 fighting games had almost played second fiddle through the 80s and part of the 90s, due to kind of fewer releases, smaller scope, range, etc., and just maybe some apprehension from the studios, you would think that it would be difficult to buck the trend, but not so. So after the successes of Street Fighter 2, Mortal Kombat, there came a string of successful titles that made the early to mid-90s a haven for fighting game enthusiasts. So to name a few, and again, this is Whistle Stop, we've got the revolutionary 3D Virtua Fighter, of course, which we've interviewed. I do apologise, I've forgotten his name that you interviewed worked on Virtua Fighter. Come back to it in a minute.
There's a few people, but Eric Wahlberg
Eric
worked a bit on it.
on the port, didn't he?
I interviewed someone, but I can't remember.
We'll come back to that. We've got Killer Instinct by Rare,
yeah.
Primal Rage,
Yeah.
with basically dinosaurs beating the watch out of each other. I thought it was good fun. Didn't do very well, but it was all right.
Good fun.
One of my absolute favourites, which is the exquisite and the bespoke to Mega Drive Eternal Champions. Absolutely love that game, which is our very good friend Eric Wahlberg worked on, and actually gives a lot of info in one of the interviews that he did as well.
And Michael Latham as well.
And Michael Latham, of course, absolutely.
It was his baby, really, and Eric sort of,
just
Shipped in a lot
a
as
combination of champions, if you like. But yeah, absolutely love that game. Bushido Blade, remember that one? Clay Fighter,
Yeah.
Clay Fighter, yeah. First Tekken,
Rise of the Robots.
the first Tekken,
Body blows.
Rise of the Robots.
Body blows.
I'm waiting for him to say it.
How about here's a game that we haven't mentioned before. It's a good fighting game in the Amiga, believe it or not. It's possible. It's possible. We haven't mentioned this. And actually, he's on our Facebook group. He often chips in, the man that made it, Fabio Capone.
Oh, Shadow Fighter.
Shadow Fighter. That's a good game.
Shadow Fighter.
Shadow Fighter is actually, honestly, the best Amiga fighting game, I would say. It looks good. It came a little bit later. It came after Street Fighter 2. Came after Body Blows.
How's it taking you so long to mention it on this podcast? Episode 29, whatever this is.
I mean, we did the text interview with him years ago.
I don't like to say it, but it probably came out a little bit towards the end of the Amiga's life, so it kind of it passed a few people by, but it's a good game, and actually it looks good. It's got cool graphics. Should have been ported to many consoles.
Okay.
And
Interesting.
bring back Shadow Fighter, Fabio.
There you go, another one of those that maybe didn't get the exposure it should have done. So you also had things like Fatal Fury sequels as well, which were quite a few. They were rampant in arcades as well, I seem to remember, various different places. Bloody Raw.
Yes, remember those on PlayStation?
Yep.
Yeah.
Soul Calibur, love Soul Calibur. Used to play that on PC.
Soul Calibur.
To name but a few. So just briefly then, on that point, because I know you mentioned Rise of the Robots deal, but are there any at this point that you want to throw in there? Age, I know we've already said Body Blows, but why is that special for you?
Just because Street Fighter, I rinsed on the Amiga. Street Fighter 2, it was all right, but I was looking for something new. You covered a lot of genres in these Whistle Top tours, haven't you? And I've always said before, you often cover genres that were my favourites in some part of my life. And the fighting genre was probably one of my favourite genres at one point. I really, really enjoyed fighting against my brothers, not literally, but on the computer screen.
Well, you probably did as well, but yeah.
But IK Plus, huge time, hours. Love that game. But Body Blows was like, oh, look at this. Amiga's own beat 'em up. Check this out,
And it
you Mega
actually
Drive
used-
owners.
In Body Blow's defense, it did use the one button a lot better
It
than
did.
Street Fighter. The Street Fighter was just like
It was
random,
silly.
wasn't it?
It was
the Street
random.
Fighter 2 on the Amiga, I'm pretty sure it just did it based on how far away you were from
Oh, okay.
the character or something. It's been ages since I played it. I think it did it that way. Whereas Body Blows, it was that you held down the button, didn't you? And then you did the direction.
Yeah,
and
that's
then
right.
It did the
Well
attacks.
remembered.
It kind of worked, man.
It kind of worked, and they did the best they could with the one button
There
mechanics.
was something else that kind of copied it. It was called, I think it was called Elf Fighter or something.
Elf Fighter.
All the characters were elves.
Oh my
Yes.
God.
Fighter.
It's kind of about memories now, yeah. It's a bit of a
Yeah.
tongue-in-cheek,
Okay.
silly game.
And then Street Fighter 2 then I think Super
Mortal
Street Fighter
Kombat
2
did it pretty good on the Amiga,
Yeah, then I
surprisingly.
think Super Street Fighter 2 also did the same thing. I think they nicked it off where you did the directions
yeah.
instead of the buttons.
It's like one of your favourite games on the Mega Drive, Balls.
Shut up. We're talking about balls.
Oh,
That game was balls, anyway.
Age, I borrowed that from you.
Yeah, no,
I must have borrowed it off you then.
because you did cover it on the podcast many years
because you
ago.
tried to accuse me of lending it to
I
you.
thought it was
how
yours.
dare, I said, how dare you?
Accuse me.
How dare you?
I
I've
remember
never
borrowing
owned
it when we
Balls
were at
3D.
high school. It must have been
Must
off
have been
Adrian.
Adrian.
Yeah.
I blame Adrian.
It must have been off Adrian.
That was that
Classic.
that episode. If you go back, was Eternal Champions and Balls
and that
and
led,
Body Blows.
and Body Blows.
that led me to tweet Michael Latham, and the rest is history. So that
Yeah,
came up
I
with
know
the idea.
because if you go back, because he gave you, he sent you like documents and
He
stuff,
did.
didn't he? Like the development
What a
document,
legend, yeah.
design documents for.
I
Eternal
mean, let's be
Champions.
honest. Yeah, had that not come back, you would probably not have had that conversation. You wouldn't have got to know him. And
Yeah.
I mean,
So thank Body Blows. That's all I can say.
Thank
That-
Body Blows.
And balls.
that's on a serious
balls.
note. That's pretty special, though, isn't it?
That
The
is
fact
brilliant.
that all
Yeah.
happened. So, but Body Blows, it's got
Ultimate
a place.
Body Blows. There was a sequel as
Get
well.
it in the
Ultimate Body
bin.
Blows. What's the one that they're in space?
Yeah, Ultimate Body Blows.
Was that Ultimate
Body Blows is.
What, they did another one?
No, it wasn't like Galactic Body
You know,
Blows.
no, you're right. No, you're right.
Body
I think there's 3 versions. I think the Amiga CD32 had a special Galactic. I think you're right. It was Galactic Body
Was it
Blows.
Galactic?
Wow.
Crazy like
It looked rad. I never played it, but it looked rad.
that. In the red.
They did a second one.
Third one.
There's 3.
Second and third.
3?
Yeah.
so.
Like a special
Wow.
edition one, I think. Yeah.
I guess you
It was
can.
Team 17, wasn't it?
Yeah, we like Team 17.
Yeah, I like Team
That's
17.
true.
Yeah, we like Team 17.
Body Blows has got its place. Balls has got its place. We don't know where that place
Just don't,
is, but it's
don't
somewhere.
Body Blows the
Place
balls.
is in the bin.
That's below
Don't-
the belt.
That's,
And
yeah.
don't balls up the Body Blows. But yeah. I mean, you got to take the rough with the smooth, haven't you? You know, and we've all got memories of it. You know,
Rough balls and the smooth balls.
It reminded me of when we did the Manscaped adverts. Do you remember?
Oh God, yeah.
Buy Manscaped.
Yes, I do.
Special code Arcade Attack.
For smooth balls. Anyway,
where are we?
go
Where
on.
are we? So, That was a lot of the 1v1 fighters, okay? The 1v1 fighters. But beat-em-ups were also still flooding the market. Lots of adaptations of the classics, of course, using like the same engines and stuff. But we saw the likes of things like Cadillacs and dinosaurs.
Love it.
One of
I
the
mentioned
best.
that in the arcade episode.
We
You
did,
did, you
yeah.
did.
Yes.
Part 1, which never got part 2. Which I'm
one in a series of one.
I'm actually gutted about. Because I did push for another one, but it was like, no, do this instead.
Part 1 was too good.
Oh,
we
brilliant
couldn't
at
top it.
starting thing, not finishing.
But that was I loved that.
it was
part.
good,
I
actually.
thought that was brilliant.
Ninja Baseball Batman.
You've just
Ninja
said the
Baseball
next
Batman.
one on my list.
Come
Ninja
on.
Baseball Batman. And if you don't know what we're talking about, first of all, shame on you. No, I'm only kidding. Go and have a listen to the Arcade Attacks Arcade Archive,
That's the one.
which we did about a year or so ago.
Part 1.
Was it really?
I think it probably was. Yeah, maybe even longer than
But
that.
those are two great 90s beat 'em ups.
Yeah, yeah.
Cadillacs and Dinosaurs and Ninja Baseball Batman.
And Knights of the Round.
And Knights of the
Round.
Knights of the Round.
Again on my list here.
Love
Oh,
it.
you guys are good. You guys are good. You've also got the very unique and extremely difficult Comic Zone.
Oh,
Comic
God.
Zone.
Oh, God.
Great
I
game,
do not
but
like that
it's
game.
hard.
No,
No.
it's
It's a
so
great
good.
game.
It looks great.
Difficult.
It sounds great, but it is absolutely hard
is
as
difficult.
nails. It's really difficult. Knights of Round, as we've just said, which again, a very sort of under-loved game. I think.
RPG light.
RPG Light.
Very light.
Yeah, no.
Extremely light.
But the latest of light.
The lightest of light with a little pinch. Just a
pinch. A dash. A dash.
A dash. A splash. What are we like? And you also had Alien vs Predator.
How can we
Another
forget
great
that?
one.
Oh, that's bad.
Another great one.
So, despite what appeared to be a bit of a chokehold on the gaming scene, both beat-em-ups and fighters were now being challenged.
Batman Returns?
Batman Returns. I've got these I've got some at the end. Shout them out. Just shout them out. But Batman Returns is a great game.
Yeah.
On the SNES. That's about it, though, isn't it?
It wasn't great anywhere else.
No, and we did a pod on that as well.
did.
We did
Yeah.
on that as well.
Yeah.
Yep.
How
Go
many
and go
pods have we
check out.
God, we're too good. But yeah, we had challenges flying in left, right, and centre with the likes of loads of racing games. Lots of RTS titles coming in. Funnily enough, we did a pod on that as well. But the golden age of RTS was very much underway in the mid 90s. Certainly on PC, some of them on console as well. And both those genres were becoming huge. Racing games had kind of always enjoyed a lot of
Yeah.
success,
Yeah.
and nothing had changed to pretty much going into the 90s. And so on and so forth. But added to that, a newer type of game started to pique the interest of gamers, which, thanks to greater advances in the hardware on consoles, such as the N64 and PlayStation, meant they could enjoy this particular genre more and more at home. So the genre in question, first-person shooters. Funnily enough, we've done a pod on that as well.
Good plug. That's a good plug.
Yeah.
Plug.
You know, hey, I'm 16 years in sales, you know. But essentially what started as kind of clunky and basic was now becoming more advanced and a real draw for the gamers in this particular genre. And it started to dilute a bit of the attention away from the usual king of the pile, which was now fighting and beat-em-up games, obviously following on from the successes of the likes of Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, and all of those other fantastic titles that we've just said. So, like I said, I did do an FPS through the ages as well. I mean, if you fancy it, there's so much in there, I can't even remember like what was in there, but it goes from, it's one of the very earliest types of game, and kind of just gains and gains and gains momentum, and today is you know, a massive genre. But wait, FPS didn't rule the roost completely. So the 1v1 fighting genre did have an ace up its sleeve. So due to the growing competitive nature of the games and the increased accessibility at arcades and on the home consoles, players could play against other human players more frequently and not just AI. So the result of all this competitiveness and testosterone and whatever else you want to throw into the mix is the creation of thousands of local and regional tournaments held in local arcades, which drew in stacks of players. They used to hold these regularly. They'd do it for, you know, credit in the arcade or prize or whatever. But really, let's face it, it was about willy waving.
Bragging rights.
Who was the exactly? Who was the best at a particular beat 'em up or a 1v1, as I said. So it soon morphed into a much larger open tournament called Battle by the Bay in 1996. Anyone know of this? Oh, you're in for a treat.
Shaking my head, I know.
Dean's sitting there. I can say right now going, yes! That's what I suggested. But this is thanks to him, and I looked at this, and some of it's great. If you want to go back and look at some of the videos, it's super competitive. And I mean, almost an art form in terms of what these guys and girls were doing on these joypads and things. Crazy stuff. But in 1996, the very first Battle by the Bay, which was designed to prove who was the very best at Street Fighter, pretty much, across the things like Street Fighter 2 and its various iterations, such as Alpha, Turbo, and the like. The first one was held in an arcade hall in Sunnyvale, California in 96 by guys called Tony and Tom Cannon, Joey Cuellar, apologies if I've butchered your name there, and Seth Killian, sorry. So it spawned 2 more events and eventually went on to become the Evolution Championship Series. So it was Battle by the Bay, then it was B3 and B4, I think. So they started then holding regular yearly events, and it turned into the Evolution Championship Series, which pretty much changed the scene forever and to this day, and still runs huge events today to prove who is the best of the best at competitive fighting across loads of well-known titles, not just Street Fighter, but bunches of titles, old and new. Yeah, so not just the newest stuff, the older stuff as well. So the Evolution event produced really what many gamers and certainly those in the competitive fighting community consider the greatest moment in gaming. And if you haven't seen this, I unknowingly saw this clip
I have seen
some years
it,
ago. Didn't really know the gravitas of it at the time, and obviously just soaked up the sort of atmosphere in the video. I thought, oh, this is cool. Now knowing what was at stake and kind of I'm
on the edge of my seat, James.
what was going on is amazing. Yeah, steady on. It's hard. I'll get there. Suspense is killing you, is it? But this moment came in 2004 at the Evolution event in the California State Polytechnic University on the 1st of August that year. So 2 competitors named Justin Wong and Daigo the Beast Umehara were head-to-head in a semi-final match, and Daigo, playing as Ken, found himself in the unenviable position of having just 1 pixel of vitality left.
We've all been there.
One pixel of health.
Oh,
left.
no.
So to make matters worse, his opponent Justin, playing as Chun-Li, then executed the super art move.
Well, it's game over.
Which was a series of extremely...
Game over, mate.
It's game over.
That's got to be it, right?
Game over, man.
I mean, well, the funny thing is, the room was like, yeah, that's it. People started walking out.
Yeah.
That was it, because it's like game over. You're never going to...
Oh, Chun-Li.
Yeah.
Let's go to the bar. It's finished.
I mean, Chun-Li, if you're facing that with full health, let alone a pixel, a pixel of health. So he executed the super art move, which was a series of extremely fast and damaging blows to put the match essentially beyond reach. The only defense available to Daigo was a parry, which could block a single strike to take no damage from the incoming attack if executed with perfect timing.
But I thought if you blocked, you got still the...
No,
right.
it's a parry.
So
This
the
is
difference is,
parry.
if you were to hold backwards, then you would
That's
take
just a
damage.
block,
yeah.
yeah.
This is actually pushing towards your opponent.
Oh, that's brave.
At exactly the right moment to block, or to parry, the attack.
Impossible.
Yeah. Where were we? So he had to do this with literally perfect timing. But the virtually impossible happened as Daigo performed a series of these difficult parries, blocking each and every one of his opponent's kicks, ending with a jump and final parry in the air. Daigo was then able to execute his own super art move and defeat Justin in a moment that's pretty much amazing to watch, regardless of whether
It is
you
crazy
like the
when you watch
and
it. Yeah,
the
It's
best-
not
you have to look
staged.
it up.
It's real.
No,
It's
no,
legit.
no.
Oh no! This is 100%,
Yeah.
and it's raw footage, and there's no kind of like setup about it. This guy actually counters, and it's amazing. Like you hear the crowd, and the crowd goes from he's done a parry to oh my god, and they go literally ballistic at the end. But if you watch a replay of it, it just gives you a sense of the gravity of the moment because the crowd just gets louder and louder and louder with every single parry that he does. I mean, the whole clip I think is about a minute. It's only like the second half of the match, and then obviously the bits after it. But that particular moment, which is known as Evolution Moment 37, funnily enough.
Wow, I want to see the other 36 moments.
Yeah.
I don't think
Just
they're
wait
anywhere
for
near as
38.
impressive. I've got to be honest with you. I don't think they're anywhere near as impressive. But this put the genre right back in the spotlight and gave life to a genre that had seen a decline from the late 90s into the early 90s slightly. So the game they played was Street Fighter 3. And our very own Dino, and I have seen this elsewhere actually. He kind of said this phrase on the group, I think earlier today or yesterday, but I've looked it up and it's actually like a real thing, so it must be a thing among sort of fighting enthusiasts. the game is so broken it's perfect. So, I mean, a lot of people, if you look at charts and things like that, a lot of people put it at the best fighting game ever, the best 1v1 fighting game ever, Street Fighter 3. I've seen a lot of
I
charts.
was right earlier what I said about how...
Yeah, well, according to what's out there, there are a lot of charts put it at the top, number one spot. So there you go. And that's from our very own Dino as well. But so broken, it's perfect. There you go.
Interesting.
Added to that, it was...
Our podcast now. It's like...
so broken, it's perfect. On the flip side, though, it was an arcade-only release, meaning it completely passed by the home market. So it didn't quite get the coverage or exposure that it had kind of hoped for. So a lot of people don't actually remember it that well, unless you were,
Was there not a version of it on the Dreamcast?
Yeah, they had Third Strike.
Third Strike. Okay, so was that a variation on
it? Finally arrived in 1999 on the Dreamcast.
But they improved it, didn't they? It wasn't a straight port.
Right.
No.
Put like more modes.
But it was too little, too late, sadly. And although it's revered by gamers as pretty much the best beat 'em up ever released, it did suffer a big lack of exposure.
It's a weird one, like you said, because it's beautiful to look at. Like the animation in it, it's phenomenal. It
one of the biggest
as a 2D
is
animation.
Yeah.
But I've never got into that one. But there's been various other ones. Like I really love the Alpha games, the Alpha Street Fighter.
This is it. This is exactly. And if you look at, I was looking at stacks of info online across various different sites, and so many places are like, oh, 3, the animation, the movement, the fluidity, the special moves, the parrying. Oh, just great. And then there's other sites that will be like, yeah, it's great, but I prefer Alpha, whatever, And it's like,
weird.
There's clearly a division there for the ones that actually played it hardcore in the arcades and the ones that were more home-based that didn't. So that's why it passed a lot of people by, because it never really got an instant home release. So there we go. But as we move into the noughties and towards today, the home console market had exploded around the millennium with the likes of Sony, Nintendo, Sega, and later Microsoft all jockeying for position on the hardware and the software fronts. Because of the now vast offering of genres and titles, beat-em-ups, it seems, had seen their heyday. Yeah, we'd seen all those great titles in the 90s, and it really did drop off a bit of a cliff. The releases in the genre are now generally sequels to the already successful titles. No surprises there. If it keeps making money, keep flogging it. Spin-offs or adaptations to new home consoles of older arcade features, So some original titles did appear, such as the likes of Fighting Force.
We like Fighting Force.
I like the first one.
And I did as well. I thought it was good. And quite a lot of freedom to do stuff. I mean, it didn't look that great, but yeah. Anyway.
I like smashing down the walls,
a lot of
and
games
stuff.
Walls, cars.
Yeah.
I mean, it meant a damn good effort. Let's be honest, for the time, because nothing new was really coming out.
Wasn't that considered as like a Streets of Rage?
It was the spiritual successor. Thank you very much.
Fair enough. And we had, of course, we haven't mentioned it yet, but Nintendo's Mad Cat Brawler on the N64, Super Smash Bros.
Oh my words!
Yeah.
That game's too much for me.
There's
too much going on.
Like, where's my character?
There's too much going on. I don't know where
Where
my
am
guy
I?
is.
Yeah.
Why? What's going on?
Where am I?
Where am I? I need
just sound like a senile old man.
I've got a good strategy, and I can sometimes beat Tate, my son, who's really good at it. I choose a level with lots of platforms high up. I hide on the top platform. When there's those people fighting at the bottom, I wait for them to fight with each other, and right at the end, I come down and just hit them off. That's my strategy. It works sometimes.
Well, it won't be anymore.
So it's quite cowardly.
Tate won't listen to this.
No, but if anyone else does, they're like, right, I know how to beat him at Smash Brothers. Keith, can we play some Smash Brothers at your place? Is that all right? So I can beat Adrian at his own game. But yeah, Super Smash Brothers and Fighting Force kind of only really sort of flying the flag for the original sort of combat melee type games. But a lot of games are now incorporating the beat 'em up style into a bigger action adventure or RPG package.
Yeah, well that's it.
Such as Sega's Yakuza in 2005. And Midway had a go as well with Mortal Kombat Shaolin Monks.
Never
PS2.
played that.
Great game.
Is it good?
So you could. I think it's Liu Kang and Kung Lao, and it's literally like it's literally a beat 'em up, but you have these different areas, and it's kind of a weird. It's not a left to right. You've got like a 3D area. And yeah, lots of different kind of environmental things you can hit and move and stuff like that, enemies and things.
Yeah.
But you use their moves from Mortal Kombat, but in
a beat 'em up kind of. Nice.
It's really good. I remember I played that a lot back in the day on the PS2.
That was one of the things that was so cool about like Streets of Rage 2 because they added those special moves.
Yeah.
Which we got familiar with from Street Fighter.
Because I like side scroll. Yeah, I like side scroll and beat 'em ups when you can do special moves because it felt like wow, this is the best of both worlds.
Yeah. definitely.
Love it. So because, it was losing, we were now losing a bit of, a lot of steam, certainly on the beat 'em up front. And it, again, we just said sort of dropped off a bit of a cliff, really. But because of this, the following years until today saw mostly spin-offs, reboots into other platforms of the array of beat 'em up classics that we loved so much during the 80s and 90s. There are a couple of notable exceptions in today's markets of beat 'em up still flying the flag, such as Streets of Rage 4, which we've said already. And again, they could have absolutely ruined it. They didn't, in my eyes. I think it's a fantastic game. One of my fave games. And as we've said before, Shredder's Revenge, which again was another good
a great one, which was a throwback when it came out. It came out around the time of the film, I think. Scott Pilgrim versus the World.
Yeah,
I've seen that. Yeah,
that's really good. And that also RPG
like
tiny little RPG. It's not so straightforward as the normal scrolling beat 'em up, but really good fun.
It's funny you say that because I was looking at a couple of lists of unsung heroes of beat 'em up, kind of
I
flying
think
the flag.
with
And that was on it.
With that, you couldn't get hold of it for a while.
Right.
I think it had a limited release on PS3 possibly, so it might have just been on PlayStation Network at the time, and it wasn't until years later. Now you can buy it, I think, on all the. On your...
Yeah, it was with I think it was a list of 10, a couple of lists of 10 that I looked at, but it was in amongst other ones like unsung heroes you must play that you'd never heard of, sort of thing. And that was one of them. So I might give that a look up actually.
You should. I think you'd enjoy it.
Good stuff. So both of those very successful and actually introduced younger gamers into the genre that pretty much is sorely underrepresented in today's marketplace. But the fact that all of the classics are available through the likes of your RetroPies and other systems mean that if we go on about them enough, then they can be enjoyed by future generations, can they not? So that was the story for sort of beat 'em ups, and it's kind of a bit of a closed door, to be fair, other than a few other games that came out. But 1v1 fighters, however, did not suffer the same fate as the beat 'em up. The genre did have a bit of a lull around the late 90s, as we mentioned, but there have always been a steady stream of quality titles arriving on pretty much all platforms. So due to the various esport events and the associated coverage, it really enjoyed generally continued growth. So Street Fighter has an impressive 80 titles in its library, believe it or not. All the variations, spin-offs, 80 titles.
Yeah, because all the variations on the arcades and everything. Yeah,
it still sounds like a lot. Though.
It does. Yeah, but
that's it. It's got 80 titles.
80.
Yeah.
And we've got the likes of Tekken, Dead or Alive. Remember that one?
Yeah,
King of Fighters, which had a massive run. Still going now, I believe.
Yeah, King of Fighters is
15 or 16 they're up to now. Guilty Gear, which I know Dino absolutely adores.
They're great.
Great looking game. Oh, beautiful game. Virtua Fighter, which we mentioned. Injustice. Marvel vs. Capcom.
Yes.
Marvel vs. Capcom.
All the versus games. Didn't even mention them. X-Men versus Street Fighter. Marvel vs. Capcom. Oh, come on.
Go on.
Darkstalkers.
I've got that. Is on my list at the end. Yeah.
Okay.
Go on.
Guilty Gear and Gears of War make like a weird mashup.
Guilty Gears of War.
Anyway, so as I said...
Well done, James.
You would play it. Who's the main guy in Gears of War?
Will be Marcus Phoenix.
Yeah, he'll be a good fighter.
Yeah.
And the Coltrane. Woo! What are we doing? Sorry. Hijacking. You can't help yourself, can you?
They need to get them on the Xbox version of the new Mortal Kombat, James.
What, Marcus Phoenix?
Yeah. Why not?
To be fair, you've got a choice of characters from Gears. Because
as well,
Link
because you've got loads of characters like Robocop and they have guns.
You have General Ram.
You can have the Lancer and stuff.
Queen Locust. Well, don't tempt me. I'll be writing letters. I'll be sending emails.
It's a good idea.
Banging on the
Like
door.
my idea all of a sudden.
Yeah.
No, incorporate not Guilty Gears of War, though. Anyway, where were we? Right. Tekken, Dead or Alive. Where were we? Just Marvel vs. Capcom. Yeah, great selection of games there. And in one form or another. But the genre still remains pretty strong. The esports industry as a total is currently worth $1.5 billion. Watching people playing games, essentially, yeah. But it's becoming absolutely huge, and I'm things like Rocket League, FIFA. But there's a load of 1v1 fighting tournaments as well, still going. And as I said, the Evolution tournament, very much alive and well, draws a big crowd, lots of money, etc. So they're not going anywhere anytime soon. But you've also got things like the advances in graphics, damage, and movement detail in things like the UFC games. Very good in terms of the sort of damage detail and stuff like that. And also the WWE 2K series as well means you can control and experience players and their favourite superstars, or create your very own, carve a career, etc. So very sort of involved, very much more involved than kind of classic beat 'em up styles and 1v1 styles. But something that, you know, the older sort of games didn't really have scope for. You couldn't really create your own people and that sort of thing. So, to summarise, any and all fighting game types really had an extremely humble beginning. So with Heavyweight Champ and later Kung Fu Master, a couple of great games. Beat 'em ups took the early initiative in the late 80s with the classics, as we said, like Final Fight and Golden Axe. And it had its golden age, should we say, around the early to mid 90s? I think that's fair to say.
Correct. Yeah, for beat 'em ups,
So it wasn't a big window. It wasn't a big window, but it was an explosion of really great titles. So the 1v1 story didn't really get going until the birth of the original Street Fighter, and then 2, and then Mortal Kombat, of course. And in the bumper years that were 1991 and 92, and then they've kind of continued to grow from then. Did it have a golden age? Did 1v1 fighters have a golden age, do we think?
Yeah, Street Fighter 2 to Mortal Kombat 2.
Yeah,
that
the early
window.
90s. Yeah,
No,
I would say, yeah, up until the late 90s when you got the X-Men versus Street Fighter and stuff like that.
just the 90s.
General,
Just the 90s.
from what I can gather
I would say.
online, the general opinion is the 90s.
yeah.
Again,
That's
some
fair.
will argue quite rightly so. The early 90s was the kind of the real golden hour. But yeah, 90s is because you've got a lot of the Street Fighter adaptations, Marvel vs. Capcom, and they were great games. You know,
From January the 1st, 1990 until December the 31st, 1999. That was the golden era.
which unfortunately included body blows as well.
It did.
And balls.
And balls.
and Rise of the Robots.
Yeah. Does Mortal Kombat have a Rise of the Robots novel? A novel based on it?
No, it does not. It probably does, actually.
Mortal Kombat. I bet there's loads of Mortal Kombat
Yeah.
books.
So therefore, fellas, we've got a very, very, very potted history of fighting games. Yeah,
You did it.
You did
There are
it,
a
man.
few more
Mate, you did
titles. There are a few more titles I wanted to throw out there that I didn't mention throughout the journey. But before I do that,
Oh, here we go.
I wanted to get your slant. So my question to each of you guys is: what are your favourite beat 'em up and 1v1 fighting games, and when was the heyday for each in your opinion? So we've done the heyday bit, the golden age type stuff. So what would you put down as your kind of most memorable / will always go back to beat 'em up and 1v1?
Easy Street Fighter 2, easy Streets of Rage 2.
Street Fighter 2, Streets of Rage 2.
Streets of Rage 2.
Streets of Rage 2.
Streets can't see past it.
No, well, that's fine.
For 1v1 though, and again this comes back to like me being a Saturn owner at the time
Yeah,
and
yeah.
stuff.
Marvel v Capcom.
Street Fighter Alpha 2.
Oh, Street Fighter
That's
Alpha 2.
yeah. I still go back and play that a lot now. I've even managed to complete the arcade version, which is like one of my very few gaming achievements. Very few.
Go Keith.
But yeah, Street Fighter Alpha 2 is my one. Definitely.
Age?
I'm not going to say Street Fighter, even though I probably could. I'm going to just say Tekken 2. I like Tekken 2 a lot.
Tekken, yeah.
I really like Tekken 2.
Tekken 2 is a great game, actually.
I had a lot of fun playing Tekken 2 on the
Beat 'em up?
PlayStation. Probably beat 'em up. I'll mix it up a bit. I really did quite enjoy Knights of the Round. There you go.
Knights Around is a great
Just
game.
stick it out there.
Knights Around is a great game.
Always, I play that game with Tate quite a lot. He always wants to play it. I'm like, yeah, why not? It's good fun.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with Dill. Street Fighter 2. I can't. There is nothing else that surpasses it. I'd probably say the original Streets of Rage as my beat 'em up.
Nice.
Fair. I almost loved the first two equally.
Yeah,
so
it's just when I played it, it was the timing. It was the timing. I just played it and I was blown. I just loved it. The visuals and the neon signs and the noises. Brilliant. I mean, don't get me wrong. 2's just a triple.
I mean, this is tough though, because that question, I think it's probably true for all of us. Like, if you're ever going back you're going on a retro pile or you're emulating or whatever, it's 9 times out of 10, one of the first games I'll play is one of those beat 'em ups.
Yep.
Because it was that explosion. Because I'm thinking about, Streets of Rage 2, Streets of Rage, Golden Axe, Turtles, Simpsons.
They're just go-tos, aren't they?
I just love those games.
Yeah. You'll always look to see if they're there,
Yeah.
and you'll be like, "Do they run all right? Is the conversion okay?"
There was so many good ones.
So there we go. Street Fighter 2 gets the love. Streets of Rage gets the love. What got the love? Oh, Knights Around, a cracking game actually. To be fair,
Yeah, it's-
Just don't mention tables. We never mention tables when we talk about Knights of the Round, do we? 'Cause it's supposed to be Knights of the Round Table, isn't it?
Yeah.
Dylan, you got a round table actually.
I do have a round table. See, we are all equal here.
yeah.
we're not actually sitting round the tables.
We're sort of sitting near it.
What are we talking about? Round tables? What is this? Rubbish. Well, I'm just about to come on and give you a couple of minutes as well before the end.
Oh.
All right. Well, you know that anyway because I told you earlier.
You did, yeah.
He's acting like he's surprised. I'm giving him a licensed hijack. Yeah. So it's worth mentioning, but it's good to get your viewpoints there, fellas. It's worth mentioning before we close up at this point that we've had the immense privilege to have interviewed via Mr. Maestro Adriano over here. I've only done one interview myself, but most of all of the fantastic ones have been done by Adrian.
Yours was good too, James. Don't talk it down. That was a great one.
I tell you
Gears
what, I
of
really
War,
enjoyed it.
Guilty
was
Gears
great.
of War.
It was
This
really
guy,
Guilty Gears of War.
Get
Shall I have a chat
involved.
with Kevin Ripple, see if we do the
Exactly.
music for it? Yeah,
For
Guilty Gears of War.
Gears.
I'll get him to compose something. Yeah, I'm sure he'd love that. But loads of industry, gaming industry giants, many of whom are involved in the beat 'em up and fighting genres. Actually,
true.
so Age, just briefly give us, if you can, just give us a flavour of some of the interviews, like your John Tobias, your Graham Boxall, your Francois Bertrand. I mean, what kind of what input did they have, and do they all have fond memories of that genre, or were they more challenging to make than other games, or what was any of your highlights from those interviews?
I think for me, getting John Tobias in the pod was quite a big deal because he doesn't do a lot of interviews.
Yeah.
And I kind of had to bully him into it a little bit. He was like, "Oh, I don't really do interviews."
You're a bully like Callum Wilson.
Now you said it.
Can you
Put
give
it
a
out
bit-
there, man. It's
Oh,
out there.
I feel like someone needs to give context on that.
Yeah,
now, 'cause
Callum
it's-
Wilson, you bully. He doesn't do many interviews, John Tobias, so he was a bit unsure at the start, going, "Well, But we got in a bit of a Twitter conversation, and I think usually he might just ignore these things, but for some reason he agreed to it, and he gave a good interview. I really think he gave a good interview. I think he was a bit nervous. I don't know. Why are you nervous, man? You made one of the best fighting games of all time.
Yeah.
But he gave us a really good insight about creating Mortal Kombat from scratch. He done all the artwork and the sort of character design. I think Ed done the other sort of programming stuff, but they made a really good team. I think he's back. He left Mortal Kombat, I think after Mortal Kombat 3 maybe, but he's come back again, I believe. He's back in the fold again. A lot of people thought Mortal Kombat went downhill after John left, and I have to agree a little bit. I kind of lost a bit of love with
even
it.
though it's like gone from strength to strength in recent years, I think it was kind of in the doldrums for a bit more combat, wasn't it?
No, I think you're right.
2000s and
Because I started seeing ads for 10, which was like the rebirth.
it was
sort
like
of.
a comeback. What really
It was
wasn't
big.
It?
It was
Yeah,
big.
yeah,
There was
yeah.
a lot of advertising around it, a lot of merch, and a lot of very well placed YouTube videos, etc.
Yeah.
But that's when it all kicked off again, and now there's a whole new.
Yes.
I mean, the anticipation for 12 is massive. So, but anyway, yeah.
And we can't forget Michael Latham as well. Obviously,
No,
that
was
legend.
He was a good friend of Arcade Attack, and he gave some great interviews, both text and audio interviews. And he was quite a shy person, really, and he was a bit not reluctant, but because he kind of trusted us, he said, "Yeah, I want to tell my story," and he helped make Eternal Champions. But he was a big fan of Street Fighter, a big fan of the fighting genre. He had a big.
He did. So tell some stories, didn't he?
He
About
did.
In one of your interviews about the because they had Street Fighter 2 in the office. Didn't
Yeah, they did,
At
yeah.
Sega of America,
Yeah.
and they still
Oh, the irony.
Yeah,
Brilliant.
wow.
But that's just so special right there to have that sort of
And
content.
Eric
behind
Wahlberg's
the
a good friend.
scenes.
in his own words as well.
And Eric Wahlberg, great interviews as well. He worked at Sega. And he also worked on Netfighter, and he gave
That's
thanks,
it.
And thanks, Keith, by the way, and everyone else in the room. But he gave a nice retro gamer interview, didn't he? Text,
Yeah.
and he spoke about Netfighter. No one talked about Netfighter. He didn't talk about Netfighter.
I was hoping you would do it during this section,
Ah.
and I've played
The
my cards
first
right,
ever-
haven't I?
The first online ever fighting game. So fair play. Good article that. Again, I can't even remember half the people for text interviews. Francois
Bertrand.
He worked on Virtual Fighter.
He did,
yeah.
Done a brilliant job, and I think then he signed up for working on the Jaguar, and I think his reputation went downhill a little bit because he made Fight for Life, and I'm like, oh no, because I think he wasn't given all the tools. Could you imagine that? Not given all the tools working at Atari.
We haven't mentioned that Double Dragon
Crazy.
game on the Jaguar either.
Double Dragon 5?
Yeah,
don't.
Double
Let's
Dragon
not.
5. That's when the two genres collided. You see? You thought SNK was bringing it. No,
Yeah.
Double Dragon
I
5.
was sincerely hoping we weren't going to go down this bloody
They were
rabbit
bringing
hole.
something.
Because
true.
we
Double
had
Dragon
this
5.
out. We had this out on the Double
We
Dragon
did.
pod,
We did have it out.
and for weeks after on the socials as well. Let's be honest.
Oh man, yeah. I mean, respect to people that gave the time to give us interviews. And
Of course.
they did make a big difference in those genres. Yeah,
I mean that I hold so much respect for you and them, to be fair, because it's just such a special thing to have all of that content in their own words about the games that they produce, and that's all stuff that we used to play that we idolised.
Yes.
You know, and it's still amazing to me, and I'm sure Keith, I'm sure you've said this before, that we're listening, talking, and watching people that created our childhoods and the gaming sections of our childhood.
Yeah,
it's just incredible. You know, to actually
It's
create
nice as
something.
well when you listen to some of these interviews, but because you can tell they're kind of genuinely sort of still kind of surprised and humbled that anyone cares about what they did 30 years ago. Yet to us, it's like it was this huge thing when we were kids.
But it is, it is, and I don't think they should be surprised at all because the memory still lives on big time.
John Tobias created that logo.
I know.
Did he actually create the
on my
logo?
shirt. The logo on my
I've heard,
shirt.
I've heard
we
there's
say
a little
what
bit of
shirt
an
you've got
argument
on?
about that
Oh,
logo.
really?
Did we actually tell everyone what shirt you've got
I'm
on?
pretty sure it was
We
John.
didn't say
Yeah,
it,
no,
did
you
we?
did. I
Well, he said Rise of the Robots.
Everyone.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, John Tobias, before he made Mortal Kombat, made the Rise of the Robots logo. Yeah,
I'm totally going to make a Rise of the Robots T-shirt because I don't think there is one in
There
existence.
probably isn't
so-
a commercially available one.
There was a Zul one back
I'm
in
gonna-
the day.
And you could launch it with another book reading.
I'll do it. I'll make one and I'll put it on the Arcade Attack merch page. And
no.
I don't think those guys are going to care. It was Mirage, I think, made Rise of the Robots. I don't think
Brian
they
May might
exist.
be angry
You
at you,
should
though.
do it with the design that Dino did for you. The Rise of the
Oh
Robots.
God,
deal.
me as the cyborg.
Yeah.
Oh God, no.
Make it happen.
Yeah,
It was
make
good,
happen.
but no. Let's do one with the actual cyborg, and then me as well. And then he did me as Solid Snake.
You
though.
were Solid Snake. That
Me
was
as Solid
cool.
Snake was very
That was
good.
cool.
I like that, mate. I like that. That's definitely going to teach.
Oh, so
There you go.
as promised, as we said right at the end, there are a few that I didn't throw in, but feel free to launch any more that you think in the last couple of minutes here.
Okay.
So there are a few I didn't mention which fall into our category today, loosely or otherwise. So we got Michael Jackson's Moonwalker, of course.
The arcade
Oh,
game.
it's kind of
the
like
arcade game. Well,
both.
I
Even
suppose both of them. It's not really a platformer, is it? So
No.
yeah.
It's like Kung Fu, basically.
It is
it is a bit
combat
like Kung Fu.
in a loose sense, like I
Yeah.
said loosely. Battletoads.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
Technically very impressive. Also balls hard as well. You know,
Very
this is-
hard,
this
yes.
is it.
There's one, I've never heard of this, but apparently this is fairly highly rated. Skullgirls.
I've heard of it. I think that's a more modern 2D series.
Yeah, it apparently sits
There's
quite
so
high
many.
on-
There's so
Yeah.
many 2D sort of anime looking.
There we go. We've got Dragon Ball
2D fun.
Fighter, obviously from Dragon Ball
Yeah.
Z. Darkstalkers.
Yeah,
which,
great
you
series of
mentioned just
games.
then.
Great series of games.
Sonic Blast Man. No, I didn't think
Okay,
you know that
man.
one either. The Punisher was a big
Yeah,
hit.
that's a
Punisher.
Capcom again. That's a great one. Isn't that one of the most expensive games on the Mega Drive? Is it? The Punisher.
It
yeah,
looks the nuts,
because there was
to
a
be
port of
You
it.
are correct.
There was a port
I'm
of
thinking
it.
of Punish
It's
on the
really
PS2.
expensive. Different game. Good game though. I've got it on the original Xbox.
Okay.
Different game, but good game.
Any more to throw out there before I get heckled online?
Oh no, we mentioned Ninja Baseball Batman. I wanted to make sure that was
And Cadillacs and Dinosaurs.
Cadillacs and Dinosaurs.
And Alien vs Predator. And Street Fighter and all that sort of stuff there. But that...
DJ Boy. Do you remember DJ Boy?
DJ Boy.
DJ
jeez.
Boy on his roller skates.
Oh mate.
But that is well, think of any more while I'm doing the closing bits and just shout them out.
Growl.
Growl. Oh, I saw that one mentioned, yeah.
That had a
James said shout out, not growl out.
Growl. Well, you've got it if you say
Growl.
growl, haven't you?
Yeah, that was an arcade. Oh, was it Data East? Maybe it was kind of like almost Indiana Jones inspired. The main character,
Gotcha.
And it was like, but it was ported to the Mega Drive, and then it was only single player, and it wasn't as good. I
I've
kind of
got-
vaguely remember renting it.
I've got a
once.
quick curveball.
Go on.
Skull and Crossbones on the Amiga. What a great game. Side scroller pirate game. More hack and slash than fighting.
Still?
But still, I'm counting it.
I've
Skull
still,
and Crossbones,
well, I put
baby.
Splatterhouse, which is kind of
Moonstone.
Moonstone on the Amiga. Moonstone, that's great.
Adrian swallowed the microphone there.
No, because I was like,
How could I
he's going to go
forget
mad if we
Moonstone?
don't. Yeah, it just
Oh,
popped
God, that was
into my
brutal.
head.
Those little fighting bits, isn't it? In Moonstone.
Before Mortal Kombat. Sorry,
Before
John.
Before Mortal Kombat,
Sorry,
there was
John.
Moonstone.
I tried to interview the guys at Moonstone, but they don't want to talk to me.
Okay.
Oh.
Two Crude Dudes.
Two Crude Dudes. Yes.
Bit of Two Crude Dudes. That was a sequel to Bad Dudes. And
It was, yeah.
I think in the arcade it was called Crude Buster. And then in the Mega Drive, it's
There
called
are
Two
quite
Crude
a few.
Dudes.
And there'll be countless more by the
Yeah.
time we've kind of, finished
Oh, it's-
today.
Night Slashers. That's a good one.
Night Slashers.
Night Slashers. I think it's Konami, and it's like a horror theme beat 'em up. and you play. You can I think one of the characters is like a priest, and you go around like kicking zombies to death and stuff. It's another. It's another
kind of like the
look
priest
it up,
in Brain
Night
Dead.
Slashers. It's really good fun.
Sounds like a game where you we need to go to the toilet at night time. There's no lights.
Night Slashers. No, look it up. Next time you got the retro pie on, Night
Night
Slashers.
taking the slashers.
Night Slashers.
And the family version of Pitch Black Wee Wee.
Oh, there's another one. What's it called? Metamorphic Force.
Yes, I've heard
He's
that.
on a roll now.
Where you kind of change. It's kind of altered beastie because you change into from human form to beast form.
All right.
That's
Can
another
you give us a
side-scrolling
rundown of the
beat 'em up.
actors that would be in that film?
In Metamorphic Force?
John Cena, who's
Who's doing the casting?
Yeah.
John Cena again.
Seriously though, Night Slashers.
Night Slashers.
Check it out.
Pitch Black Wee Wee. Look it up.
About 2 times now. I'm getting old.
Oh yeah, twice a night with Night Slashers. Yeah, for sure.
Keith's going to look on his phone now for some more. But whilst he does,
No, I just
that
they're
there
popping
was a
into my
very
head, is what you said.
holy with holes, not that kind of holy. An at-a-glance look at all things fighting through the ages. So as always, but especially more so with this one, I know I'm going to get bare amounts of stick online, but I'm here for it. I'm here for it. So grab us on the socials for your say and have a shout. Any game we've missed, do tell us, and do tell me because I'd like to know. And obviously to give any plaudits and whatever to any of the games that we have mentioned, and any of your favourites as well, and any of your great memories as you frequently do. So do feel free to give us a grab, give us your thoughts, tag us. But unless Keith's got any more,
No.
which I don't think he has.
No.
All that's left for me is to say, thank God that's over. Did
Well
I do
done,
a good
mate.
job, Keith?
You did a great
You
job,
did it.
mate. You did it.
Did it?
Four
Smashed it.
Cheers,
As the
Four
kids
crude
say.
dudes and out.
All crew dudes. Till next time, adios.